Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed my show. I'm glad that you guys can join me. I always tell you, you could be anywhere at this particular time. I mean, granted, anywhere, time and space, there are limitations on that, but whatever. You could be pretty much anywhere. I'll go with that to be more accurate. But you find yourself here under this voice, and I appreciate you for being here under this voice. I have a damn good show for you today. And it's going to be a full show, with the exception of the last hour, but we'll see how the conversation goes with Michael Maloof. Him and I were on text yesterday, going back and forth, greatly disagreeing. Greatly disagreeing. At least I think we were disagreeing. But we'll see when he comes on air. What we were talking about and we're going to get into on the show, this face-saving mechanism that is taking place among the Russians. What I mean by that is, in a recent interview, Donald Trump was like, Putin is going crazy. I don't know what has happened to Putin. He's just gone crazy. He's just lost his mind. Because 13 people died with over like hundreds of missile strikes. Now, to put this in context, we had signal leaks because of the incompetence of the people who are in the White House, of a house or an apartment that they blew up to get one guy. We have been giving money to Israel as it's been taking down blocks, killing people, starving people, having babies, children being burned alive, being starved alive. No issue. No issue. We're paying 80% of that, so we're doing that. No issue. And Russia does this, and Trump is like, Putin has lost his mind. Putin is prosecuting a war. That's what is happening, a war that the U.S. provoked. That is what he is doing. And Donald Trump is continuing to give money and assistance to that war, which is part of the reason that you've had like 1,000 drone strikes flying into Moscow over the last week. Here's the catch. When Donald Trump made that point about Putin has lost his mind, the reporter asked the follow-up, and the follow-up was, hey, you realize that Putin's helicopter was nearly taken down by a drone swarm that was going after the helicopter. And Trump's like, I didn't hear about that. And so what Russian media has started to do is point out, well, we think Donald Trump is getting quote unquote filtered information, that the information he's getting is filtered. He's not getting the entire story. Effectively, he's being maneuvered by the deep state. Is he? How do they know that? And not just how do they know that? Do they even believe that? And I guess my point of view is whether they believe it or not is secondary to the point that it seems that the entire point of this narrative of filtered, effectively he's being maneuvered by people in his administration who's not giving him all the information, maybe in two parts. One, to sow distrust in the people in his absolution, if indeed the information is being filtered. But I suspect that more so it is a face-saving mechanism where they can, on some level, absolve Donald Trump of blame. For them to say, hey, I know he's acting nuts, but he's acting nuts and he's saying these things, not because he's the president of the United States and he's in a war with us, even though he's pretending to be a mediator, even though Russia knows he's pretending to be a mediator. Not that. It's because he's being filtered as information. He's not getting the entire story. He doesn't know that the Ukraine has been flying drones and missiles and lobbing these things into civilian areas. I don't believe for a moment. Some maybe, but for that belief to be true, because I don't know if that's true. It is very possible Donald Trump is doing exactly what he did on the issue of Gaza, where it was kind of like, well, I'm going to ignore the fact that Israel is violating the ceasefire while simultaneously going after Hamas. There's no reason for me to believe that's not true. It may be true, but even if it is true, Trump chose that. He chose to surround himself with people who are lunatics and Zionists and war hawks and neocons. people of policy. He chose the people that he wanted around him. Why on earth would he be shocked that those people would be going down a certain pathway, knowing full well that the executive is incompetent, doesn't know anything about the world? I think Ted Rawl used the term incurious about the world. Fair enough. And he only knows what they dump into him. Why would he be shocked by that? And on some level, you have to almost accept that the people that he chose for that job are doing what Trump wants them to do. Like, I don't know if I buy this notion that Donald Trump is being, quote unquote, maneuvered by the deep state. If his information is being filtered. I don't know if that's true. I have nothing to say that that's true or not. Donald Trump lies as easily as he breathes. And so with a man who is completely amoral to any notion of anything that has anything to do with truth, honesty, etc., lie in the moment where they ask him, hey, did you hear about Putin's plane being nearly shot down? Would that guy lie? Yes, that guy would lie. Why wouldn't he lie about everything else, right? So I strongly suspect that whether it's true or false, that they are trying to allow him to save face from the context of their audience, from many Russians who probably sound more like Medvedev, who are like, why are we pretending with this goofball? Why are we acting as if he's a mediator when he is a participant in the context of this conflict? And why they would do this is not necessarily the most shocking thing in the world. If you came from 3 years under the Biden administration, where Biden was effectively a lunatic that was going to bring the country to a third world war, and you finally get somebody who's at the very least pretending to be a mediator and is pretending that this is not his war, even though he is giving money and weapons and everything else, at the very least selling that stuff, then at the very least, that's a less gear than the other gear. And you may even believe that on some level, you may even be able to maneuver Trump to just walk, which is what you want anyway. We want the goofball to walk. We want him to throw his hands up. I'm tired of it. All of you are horrible people, and I'm leaving. And if you can just walk without continuing to add on more money that will keep the conflict going longer, even better. Meaning, all of this negotiation, all of this, I'm giving my memorandums, all of this stuff has everything to do with, on some level, image management and manipulation of the principal, that principal being Donald Trump. There's no way on earth, that Russia trusts Trump, B, that they believe that he is an actual mediator as opposed to a principal in the conflict, or that they are naive enough to go down any kind of path with the United States on any kind of deal without any kind of hardcore guarantees. And even those guarantees, they know, are ultimately temporary. It's a temporary reprieve that they will indeed take. It is about maneuvering and managing Trump. It's not about whether there's honesty coming out of Trump on this notion of just not having the data or not having the information. I don't believe it for a moment. And this is where I'm getting this from. So, and by the way, this has been said a few times. This is not just once that they pointed this out, but senior Kremlin aide Yuri Yushlikov, nailed that last name, has said POTUS is being poorly advised on Ukraine. Quote, Trump has made many statements. Moscow monitors them. I bet they do. Trump still fails to understand that Russia only strikes military infrastructure targets. It appears that Trump is not informed about Ukraine's terrorist attacks against Russian cities, only about Russia's retaliatory measures. Again, that may or may not be true. There's nothing for me to go with that is true, considering Donald Trump lies as easily as he breathes. And in that moment, he could have just lied. He does it all the time. Hey, the Supreme Court totally upheld my deportation of the guy to San El Salvador. No, they didn't. He lied. He just lied. Hey, grocery bills have gone down. Hey, I'm on the phone with Kim Jong-un. I hope you get my point. You can list 1,000 of these over the course of just a month, right? So I don't know that. What I strongly suspect, as I pointed out before, this is a face-saving mechanism for their own audience, who probably sounds more like Medvedev right now. Probably sounds more like Medvedev. You've lied, you've cheated, you've stole, you've killed Russians. Why are we playing this game? I suspect that is the case. But my guest is here. Let me get to him. I am joined with the man himself, Dr. Wilmer Leon. Dr. Wilmer Leon is a radio host, political scientist, nationally syndicated columnist, host of Connecting the Dots on YouTube and on his syndicated broadcasts. I believe it's syndicated, or maybe I'm getting this wrong. In fact, before I even say syndicated, I'm just going to not say that. I'm going to strike that out with whiteout. And I'm going to ask you, what is your show on Sirius?
Sirius is not syndicated because Sirius XM is its own network.
Fair enough. Thank you. So, that's what the whiteout came in handy.
So the show airs nationally and internationally over the internet on Sirius XM channel 126, but it is not nationally syndicated. It is nationally broadcast.
Thank you. And what is the name of that show, just so the audience would know?
Inside the Issues with Wilmer Leon.
Inside the Issues with Wilmer Leon. How are you doing today? You doing okay this morning?
Man, look, I'm talking to you, so I'm doing great.
Well, I'm talking to you. I'm doing just as well, and I appreciate
you just need to get out more. That's your only problem.
That is true, but that doesn't have anything to do with this. There's nothing to do with this conversation. I'd be remiss if I didn't. Oh, there's so much to hit domestically. Mm-hmm. So I'll hit this. Do you remember when?
Wait a minute. Can I respond to what you very clearly and accurately laid out?
Please.
Because in listening to that, there are a couple of things that I want to reiterate.
Please.
Because people need to understand that you're absolutely right. When you talked about Trump's advisors, I'm going to quote one of the smartest men I ever knew, which was my father, who would say, son, when you ask the wrong person the wrong question, you will usually get the wrong answer. And he was a wise guy.
Wise man.
And not a made man, but a wise guy. And so part of that, I think, factors into the Trump info stream. Mm-hmm. I don't think that it's as much as they are withholding information from him. I think it's more that they don't know what the hell is going on. And that in many instances, they have become captives of their own misinformation and disinformation.
Interesting.
I was trying to find there's a quote that I had here yesterday. And unfortunately now it was CNN. Oh, here it is. So CNN reports Trump's intervention, talking about, I think, the relationship between what's going on with Europe and Ukraine, coming at a crucial moment in Moscow's war. Now, that point, Moscow's war is just flat out historically wrong. It's wrong. But that is the dominant narrative that those in the Trump administration are using to engage in their analysis and their policy, and that's what's being fed to the American people.
Yeah.
In the same paragraph, Trump's intervention comes at a crucial moment in Moscow's war, will be viewed with relief in the West as a signal that the White House has grown frustrated with Putin's refusal to accept a proposed 30-day ceasefire. Well, that's totally out of context.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't explain the Minsk Accord 1 lie. It doesn't explain the Minsk 2 lie. It doesn't reference the Istanbul lie.
Right.
So CNN now, this is the news, presenting to the American people that Putin is just obstinate and, I guess, crazy. instead of putting this in its proper historic context. And folks, this isn't my opinion.
Yeah.
This is history. So that's the first point. The second point is there's always been this faction in the American media and in the elite that will, and if you talk to the average American about what's going on in Ukraine, they'll tell you, oh, Putin's crazy.
Yeah.
Putin's crazy. He's a madman. He's just crazy. But now I think there's a very subtle nuance in Trump's language, which is he's gone crazy. Not that he's always been, but that he's gone, because that's the quote from Donald Trump. Putin has gone crazy. And I think that Trump's language is shifting because he now is trying to find his way out so that he can say, well, I tried to work with the man. When I was talking to the dude, he was okay. But all of a sudden, boom, he just lost his mind. And now I can't deal with him anymore. That's the other thing, too, folks need to remember, Trump sent offensive weapons into Ukraine during his first administration. The United States started this conflict. All Putin is doing is, what do they say on the corner?
Finishing
it. Hey, you started it. Now I'm gonna finish it. And so, what was the other point? Because I made a couple notes here. And in this whole conversation about, so I can't even read my own writing. Negotiation. The United States never negotiates. Mm-mm. The United States dictates and then expects you to capitulate. And then once you capitulate, now we have an agreement. Well, they've run up against a guy that ain't playing that game, because it's important for people, I believe, to understand that, and this is not, oh, Wilmer, you're a pro-Putin bot. No, I just read and I understand history. His demands have been consistent the entire time. He hasn't wavered on anything. Every now and then, CNN or MSNBC or one of these other entities will say, oh, he's thrown new things into the... No, he has not. Listen to Lavrov. And see, this is another difference between the United States, and I'll just use these two as examples, Russia and China. When you listen to Wang Yi, the foreign minister in China, and then you listen to Xi Jinping, they say exactly the same thing. When you listen to Sergei Lavrov and then you listen to Vladimir Putin, they say exactly the same thing. When you listen to Lil Marco and Stinky, as my boy Tom Porter loves to call him, when you listen to Lil Marco and then you listen to Stinky, you go, do they even talk to each other?
Yeah.
So, and the final point, Sergei Lavrov, and I've said this on here many times, Sergei Lavrov, lifelong diplomat. Wang Yi, lifelong diplomat. Went to like the Chinese diplomatic university. He has studied diplomacy his entire life. Lil Marco can't spell diplomacy. Not because he's stupid, which he's not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but because he doesn't understand it.
Right.
Now, folks, you can debate it if you want to, but history proves me to be correct. With that being said, what you got?
There's also a very basic premise that losers don't get to dictate terms.
Oh!
Like, the notion that you lose a war And after losing the war, you come in and it's like, yeah, we're going to demand that we have our troops on your soil.
Oh, I'm glad you said that, because that takes me back to the Turkey, what, 2 weeks ago or 10 days ago, when they were presenting this as Zelensky challenged Putin to come to Turkey and negotiate. Putin said,
yeah, like, why am I doing that? Why am I doing that? That was never postulated. That didn't happen the first time we were in Istanbul where you guys blew it off.
They are not newsflash, boys and girls, they are not negotiating a ceasefire.
No.
They are negotiating terms of surrender.
Right there.
And that's one of the main differences in the West's narrative and reality. You've heard me say many times, fire up the USS Missouri, resurrect Admiral Hirohito, because y'all are about to surrender the same way Japan did in World War II. You're about to surrender.
I keep saying Medvedev.
Okay,
I'm the velvet glove. Medvedev is the honesty. Medvedev is the honesty. And when he's like, look, either you come to terms now or next time it's going to be an unconditional capitulation.
Your opportunity to negotiate has passed.
Yeah.
A number of times. Let's not forget that Boris Johnson went to Zelensky on behalf of the West and said, you will not negotiate a peace agreement with this man.
Yep.
That they said that. Putin holds up the papers and said, been there, done that. Then you got Angela Merkel coming on and saying, well, yeah, we lied during Minsk. Yep. We lied. We were never going to do that. Once you hear that, and final point, if this whole mythology of Trump, of Putin wanting to take over Europe, if that were true, why did he wait 8 years?
Exactly.
Why did he try to negotiate for 8 years on the Donbass conflict before he finally intervened? Folks, if you can answer those questions, then I might consider saying that the West narrative is correct.
By the way, with 150,000 people, like, that wasn't even enough to take over all of Ukraine,
right? Let
alone all of Europe. Like,
you can't take over Cleveland with 150,000 people.
The story makes no sense, and yet they run with it, and they tell their populations constantly.
That's why I say they're captives of their own narrative.
I just keep thinking he can't be that stupid. Like, the notion that you come out with a deal and you say, all right, in my 22-point plan, 22 points is just astonishing by itself, right? In my 22-point plan, we are going to take over the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, and we're going to put American troops on the power plant, and European peacekeepers, effectively NATO, is going to go into Ukraine. And it's like, okay, so you haven't heard anything that we've said in this entire time. Fair enough. We'll solve it on the battlefield. It becomes that. And we'll see how long Ukrainian military can hold up, which is the reason why they're begging for a 30-day ceasefire. Hell, Zelensky was out here recently saying, well, we wouldn't mind a ceasefire going out till January. I bet you would. I bet you would. I bet you would. Good luck on getting it. Good luck on getting it.
I hope you get what you want for Christmas.
Yeah, I know, right? I know, right?
And I hope the Easter Bunny brings you some colored eggs.
Oh, I hope you get that pony. I'm highly doubtful that you are going to get that pony, but Lord knows I hope you get that pony.
I want a unicorn.
You want a unicorn?
I want a unicorn.
I think I want a kangaroo. I saw this video
of this woman.
I like
to hang my shirts on the horn and the unicorn.
Oh, I see. I see. That's kind of unfortunate for the animal, but fair enough. Fair enough. Um, there is a clip going out, and what is the guy named? Ironically, head of Africa, black guy, Langley is his last name.
Oh, General Michael Langley?
Michael Langley. Yeah. How ironic is that last name?
AFRICOM.
AFRICOM, right. Yeah. I've seen this clip once before when he was in the front of the giving testimony. And when he was giving testimony once before, he pissed off a lot of people in Africa who love Ibrahim Traore, love him to bits. I even like the guy, right? And he says this, and this is what pisses everybody off. And then I'm going to play his follow-up to this.
Oh, this is funny.
When he doubles down. This is great.
Of a country is receiving gratuities on the side that in order to the benefit of the strongman leader and not to the populace of the country. Does that sort of corruption and bribery go on with regard to the Belt and Road?
Absolutely, Chairman. I see this, and I don't mind calling them out, but Captain Tory and Burkina Faso, as they know that both, whether it's their gold reserves, that is all those proceeds are just in exchange to protect the junta regime. There's a number of examples across.
He says Ibrahim Traore's the gold reserves that they have nationalized is just there to protect the quote unquote junta regime. And what's wild about it is later on in the testimony, the guy who's asking the question opines, I don't understand why Africa can't pull themselves out of the morass.
Right.
Like, I don't understand why they just can't do better after all of these years. I'll give you one example. The uranium that France was getting, I forget from which of the countries, they were paying something like, let's say, Niger, thank you. They were paying like 80 cents on it.
Right.
France was selling it for $200. And this guy's like, I don't understand why these colonialist former colonies can't just get themselves their act together. Right. Well, Ibrahim Traore nationalized the gold reserves and is using it for the benefit of the country. He is building roads. He is talking about building banks, meaning that stuff is being used directly for the interests of the country. I've seen nothing to say that he is effectively using that for his own self-aggrandizement. And this hearing has a lot to do with notion of USAID and stuff like that. Like, hey, we need to figure out how to use this better to bribe these countries to do U.S. interests. And how bad China and Russia are for using their resources to benefit the country in some way. Effectively, he's saying, well, they're just using it in the way that we used it, but they're bad for doing it. It is a warped American point of view that is maddening when you watch it. If you're sitting on the moon watching it, but that if you're an American, you may accept. All right, so I believe he's in Kenya, and he's having a conversation where somebody brings up to him hey, you realize Africa was kind of pissed off at you when you said the nonsense about Ibrahim Traore. The man is a rock star here.
Part of it.
So we don't like what you said about him. Do you have anything to say about that? This is his response, and I want to get your take on his response.
Rule rather than for public welfare. These remarks sparked widespread, condemnation across the continent. What did you mean by that statement?
Let me speak to Burkina Faso's sovereignty. They maintain their sovereignty. They make the decisions how they use their resources. They make their decisions who their resources go to for military support. That's their sovereign right. But my cautionary tale was just from a military perspective. That was a Senate Armed Services Committee asking me a direct question. Burkina Faso, a lot of great things going on to progress them forward, okay? But then when you look at the military part of it, knowing that that's the epicenter of global terrorism, It was my time to illuminate that this is probably their weakest point, and there needs to be sufficient resources going towards for the whole fight of terrorism in that country.
What's wild about this is that the U.S. for two things, real quick. One, he was talking about gold mines, not this notion of military stuff. He's talking about gold mines and these guys enlarging themselves based off the gold that they nationalize. And by definition of saying nationalize, it implies that it was going somewhere else prior to him nationalizing it. There's that. Two, the US has a history of using terrorists, either in Libya, either in Syria. Oh God, in Syria, the way that we use terrorists in order to undermine those governments. Right. Afghanistan. I mean, like, meaning this argument about terrorism, when we've been the backers of terrorists historically, is pretty rich. Give me a take on this. Yeah, give me a take on this. I'm not going to say anything else. What are your thoughts?
Michael Langley is a fool because for a lot of reasons, and I realize that this is his job.
Yes, it is.
But dude, you're a Marine. You need to understand a failed mission when they bring it to you. You're trying to defend the indefensible. That's why I say you're a fool. I don't know Michael Langley from Michael Jordan. They both got bald heads. And they're both black men. But again, my father, son, don't try to clown me. You're trying to defend the indefensible. What you said before the Senate was utter idiocy. I heard you say it. You said it to me.
I played the clip.
What you didn't play was him saying that they needed to arrest General Traore.
Oh, yeah, I didn't get that part.
Yeah. He's using his gold reserves. You didn't say squat about terrorism in that segment. You said he's using his gold reserves to provide for his own security. Well, if you're a military man, isn't that and you're the president of the country, and your country is being attacked by terrorists, isn't that what you're supposed to do? What wasn't said, but the underlying theme in that is you're using your gold reserves to protect yourself against the people we're paying to overthrow you.
Yes.
So that our interests can come back in the country and continue to rape and pillage and extract at pennies on the dollar. That's what he didn't say, but that's what he's talking about. Michael Langley, I was born at night, not last night. So we have hundreds of years of colonialism, of neo-colonialism, whether it be France, whether it be England, whether it be who was that took over Congo? Belgium. Dude.
Germany got in at the last minute. Yeah.
Dude. Been there, done that. So now what the hell was he talking about? Well, as a military man, look, as soon as you use the word sovereignty, I don't even think he really, as an American general, I don't even think he really understands what sovereignty means.
Neither do I. He's an
like
African.
Little Marco. He doesn't. Little Marco can't spell whatever was it he couldn't spell.
Diplomacy.
Dude, Langley does not understand sovereignty. the international understanding of control of a defined geographic space, sovereignty, international recognition of control of a defined geographic space, that you are able to use militarism in order to defend. Sovereignty. That's what sovereignty is.
We don't believe in that.
No, never have.
There's no
never
evidence we believe
not
in
since
that.
World War II. So Michael Langley, who are you talking to? Because what you said was utter idiocy.
I can only think that he's hoping the African audience didn't see all of his testimony. Because otherwise,
it has nothing to do with the testimony. He's hoping the African audience doesn't understand history.
Mm.
That's what he's talking about. Doesn't understand history. And for Senator Wicker to say, well, I can't quite understand why African countries can't seem to. You're either ignorant, stupid, or ignorant and stupid. Look, Traore is building nuclear power plants.
Yep.
Traore is Burkina Faso is now launching satellites. They have they are now able not only to grow cotton, but they are able to refine cotton from its raw state into a textile. They are processing and mining and processing their own gold. They are not only growing their own rice, but they are now able to process their rice so that it looks better than in the raw form that they were, because Burkina Bay's people from Burkina Faso, Burkina Bay's they preferred imported rice because it looks better than the domestic grown rice. So they're now they're working towards one thing that the West can't stand: food independence. They are working towards growing their own and eating the same thing they're doing in Nicaragua. The United States cannot stand the fact that Nicaragua has become food sovereign. There's that word again. Michael Langley, come on, bruh. No. Do better than that. Do better than that.
I don't think he can. I mean, and to make the point clear, Syria is overthrown, meaning in the pages of the New York Times, even, they point out Obama had been paying billions of dollars a year to overthrow the Syrian government. Okay, who was he using to do this? Obviously, he was using terrorists to do it, and renaming it in the way that Bush renamed torture. Enhanced interrogation. But these are free Syrian rebels. They're rebels now. They're not terrorists, they're rebels. And one of the people for ISIS who was in Idlib that when Trump was in office protected al-Jilani, well, he shaves the beard, puts on a suit, gets coached by the UK.
And sharpens his sword to chop heads.
Yep, he used to chop heads. Donald Trump goes out, shakes the man's hand, says he has a tough history. Yeah, chopping off heads. The very hand that you shook was the hand that he used the knife to chop off heads. If that is not, like, the notion that this guy was leader of ISIS or one of the leaders of ISIS, and you're shaking his hand, and now all of the Western countries are removing the sanctions. Okay, well, the jig is up, right? And as you point out, Africa is not shocked. Like, there's a reason that they kicked out the US. There's a reason that they kicked out the French. They full well understood where the terrorism was coming from. And so it's not like, it's like, okay, so you guys came here, built a military base, you weren't doing anything else for us, and we strongly believe that you were paying these terrorists in order to create a justification for you to remain here. Okay, well, we're getting rid of you, and we're going to deal with that terrorism issue in a different way. And he is crying hard. I believe he's in Kenya, crying hard about, well, I just pointed to the security issue, that you need a different solution to the security issue, effectively saying, hey, you need to bring us back.
Right.
Nobody buys that. Nobody buys that premise.
No. And man, you got 4 stars on your lapel. You got 4 stars. Look, there's a reason that ECOWAS, there's a reason that the Alliance of Sahel States left ECOWAS.
Yes.
There's a reason when the Nigerian government threw out France, ECOWAS said, well, you better relent or we're coming in. And they all went, man, get out of here. And what did ECOWAS do?
Back down.
Nothing.
Yeah.
The United States, look, folks, the empire is dying. And this is not some un-American statement. It is a historical reality that all empires die. Name me one that has not. You can't.
Yeah.
There was a time in the world when the adage was the sun never sets on the British Empire. Now, Britain is where you go for vacation and nasty food. So, I mean, that bangers and mash thing, man, that's, ugh.
Yeah.
That's nasty.
I mean, had Brits tell me that the best food they have is.
Don't get me wrong. They can cook you get some of the best Indian food
Right
in
there.
London.
Yes. Yes.
So they can cook, but
Yeah.
their cuisine
Yeah.
is horrible.
Yeah.
Anyway, what happened to the Roman Empire? What happened to the Greek Empire? What happened to the Ottoman Empire? They tend to collapse for the same reason. Overreach.
Yeah.
And now with the rise of BRICS, see, this is one of the things that just really, of the number of things that disgusted me about what's his name from South Africa, the president of Ramaphosa. Cyril Ramaphosa. When Ramaphosa begged Donald Trump to allow him to come to the White House, and then Trump acquiesced, Ramaphosa was saying, we're here to talk about investment. We're here to talk about economic development. And all Donald Trump wanted to talk about was alleged, mysterious, felonious
white genocide,
apartheid against. That's insanity. But anyway, Ramaphosa never turned to Trump and said, and he could have done this as diplomatically. He could have said, Mr. President, there's a reason that South Africa joined BRICS. And that's all he had to say. The acronym BRICS was never mentioned. Mr. President, I'm here to talk about economic development and investment. And you want to talk about some fictitious theory of genocide in South Africa. There's a reason we joined BRICS. Then he just could have sat back. But boom. Boom.
Yeah.
Next point.
You couldn't do it.
Couldn't do it. No, wouldn't do it. Wouldn't do it. Wouldn't do it. Because they sent a boy to do a man's job.
Yeah. He's a billionaire.
Yeah. I believe that a big part of his mission was personal.
Ramaphosa?
Yes. I believe when he was talking about, because he's the guy, I'm trying to think of the Godfather context. I can't at the moment. He's the middleman. He's the guy when Jamar, when you finally decide that you're going to buy your diamond mine in South Africa, you got to go through Ramaphosa to get your mine. And then after you've bought your diamond mine and you decide that you want to make the whole bracelet, so you're going to buy the gold or the platinum as well, you got to go through him. That's how he made his money. He made his money being the South African middleman, as after Mandela was freed,
Mhm.
Ramaphosa became the business rep, the liaison. And so he always gets a cut. So I believe he was there, feathering his own nest. That may not have been his only mission, but that was part of the mission. And so, because remember, Trump did not invite him to the White House.
Mm-mm.
He begged the White House for an audience. And I use that term intentionally. He wanted an audience with Trump.
Yeah. But what is it? Taco, what did they call him? Taco something. He freaked out. Yeah. I mean, from my understanding, and look, I don't doubt that in the least.
Mhm.
The ANC, for the first time in 30-something years,
Mhm.
it is becoming clear to the public that they've lost the mission.
Mhm.
You are run by a billionaire in a party that is supposed to be somewhat revolutionary. And you've added in, let's say, the apartheid party into your own, what is the Democratic Alliance, as they call themselves, into the government. And so part of the belief was you have a lot of white folks with a lot of money saying, dude, Trump is hurting our business. You need to go kiss some ass. You need to go kiss his ass.
Mhm.
And as I was telling Kofi, I was like, you realize Trump is going to bring up the white genocide thing, right? Like, because there was nothing in me to believe that Ramaphosa was going to get the level of respect that he deserved as a head of state.
Right.
If Zelensky didn't get it, if Canadians didn't get it, Carney, meaning Trump was like, yeah, Canada should be the 51st state. He's saying that while dude is there and is trashing elements of his own government while the guy's there. Meaning, if he doesn't even give white people this level of respect, I think Trump is racist. I don't think Ramaphosa's going to get it, especially when he has Elon Musk saying, oh, they're killing white folks. They're committing genocide against white folks.
And Ernie Els, the golfer, Ernie Els, and Retief Goosen. What the hell were they doing there?
Yep.
What was Ernie Els and what were Retief Goosen? If as South Africans, see, I think they wanted golf courses. They want to build golf courses in South Africa. I mean that seriously.
Yeah.
And so you bring them to the lunch or you invite them to the state dinner. What in the world were they doing in that room at that time? Because and don't be surprised if Donald Trump is a minor partner in the golf courses that Retief Goosen and Ernie Els want to build in South Africa.
Wouldn't be shocked. Wouldn't be shocked at seeing the crypto thing. I wouldn't be shocked in the least.
Exactly.
Wouldn't be shocked in the least. All right. One last thing, and this can be all of 2 or 3 minutes. Federal court strikes down Donald Trump's tariff policy. And what's funny about this is funny on so many levels. He has to pay that money back. Meaning any other money that he collected on tariffs has to now be paid back. And it's possible that an injunction is going to be filed against the tariffs going forward, which means China has 10% tariffs on the U.S. that the U.S. is not able to respond to because the courts struck those down, in addition to the host of other tariffs. Just amazing.
The beauty of this, the first sentence in that subheading, the U.S. Court of International Trade. Not the World Court, not the International Court, not the Kangaroo Court, the U.S. Court.
Yep.
He's lost in his own country again.
By the way, one of those was one of his judges, by the way.
Yeah.
And it was unanimous.
Yes. Because it's wrong.
Yeah.
It's just wrong. And one thing about judges, I'll make this generalization. I know it isn't true across the board, but even the most biased judge still wants some legal rationale for the decisions that they make. Even if they have to kind of construct some kind of, fictitious explanation, they still want to be able to turn to the law and say, I held this, or I made this decision, I'm issuing this holding for this reason. He's bringing them utter idiocy. And they're saying, nah, man, the math just don't work.
Yeah. It's like you can't even have nothing to hold on to for this.
No.
So their thinking is it's going to go to Supreme Court. And of course, you have a completely conservative Supreme Court. So who the hell knows what happens?
I don't see, based upon the way the Supreme Court has been going recently, and based upon the fact that this is a unanimous decision by the International Court, first of all, I'm not going to say they're not going to take the case, but I'd be surprised if they did take the case, because there's really no case to take.
Yeah.
All they're doing, they'd be better served by saying, we don't need to hear this. It's already been decided. There's nothing for us to debate here. They would be better served doing that than taking it, deliberating on it, and coming out with a 5-4 decision or a 6-3 supporting the International Trade Court. The U.S. International Trade Court unanimously held the following. Why are you coming to us?
Yeah.
Unless they're trying to find some procedural ground upon which to challenge the decision. What are you going to say? That the Court of International Trade has no jurisdiction on tariffs? I mean,
they do. Yeah.
That's why they're there.
Fascinating. Just fascinating. But Dr. Leon, thank you for this, man. I always appreciate these conversations. I always enjoy these conversations. Dr. Wilmer Leon, we were supposed to talk about the big, beautiful bill. I saw that clip. And I definitely want to get your take on it, just in general.
Just
I thought it was outrageous.
If I could, on that point, just for a second, I think it's important to understand that you look at where the pushback is coming from. A lot of the pushback is coming from Nebraska. Mike Flood, the congressman in Nebraska, went to a town hall and got hammered,
as he should have.
And the Ashley Hinson from Iowa went to a town hall and got hammered. This is the Midwest. This is MAGA ground. This reminds me of Thomas Frank's "What's the Matter with Kansas?" I think in fact I'm going to reach out to Thomas and see if I can get him back on my show, because folks need to go back and reread "What's the Matter with Kansas," because and where are the Democrats here? This is prime opportunity for the Democrats to be front and center as a party, explaining to the American people the ugly details in this bill. Cutting 700, what is it? 700.
It's like $100 billion from Medicaid.
From Medicaid.
Yeah.
Asking the states to pay more when the states are already at the brink of bankruptcy because the government from the Reagan administration forward has cut federal programs giving money back to the states. The states have no more money, and the states can't raise taxes anymore, to property taxes and all the other kinds of taxes that states have had to raise to pay for the things the states provide. There's no more money here. And you want to do this so Donald Trump and his crew can get bigger tax cuts. Look, you can explain it. I can explain it. Why can't the Democrats explain it?
Not to mention $20 trillion in the debt. There's that too. Professor, thank you for this, my man. Dr. Wilmer Leon, he is radio host, political scientist, nationally syndicated columnist, host of Connecting the Dots, and also Inside the Issues on Sirius XM. Thank you, my man. You be safe, okay? Have a good one.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Oh, fantastic guest, fantastic guest. I want to go from one fantastic guest to another. The man himself, John Kiriakou, the man my mom, I think, has a bit of a crush on. She's like, he's so cute. He's so cute. Former CIA officer, co-host. Well, former CIA officer. And John, what is the name of the show that you're on now? Because you're doing two things. You're still going around the world giving lectures, but you're also, if I'm not mistaken, on a YouTube show with Michelle.
Yeah, I'm doing two. I have one called Deep Focus with John Kiriakou, and that one's more like in-depth analytic kind of show. And then Ted Rall and I are doing one called Deprogram.
Deprogram, okay.
Yeah, it's an hour of us talking about the news. And knock on wood, they've both been going pretty well.
Ted is fantastic.
Ted's fantastic.
His historical knowledge is mind-blowing to me.
Oh my gosh. And let me tell you too, Jamal, I'm so honored to come on just after Dr. Wilmer Leon. Wilmer, I mean, you and I and Wilmer used to sit near each other in Washington at Sputnik, and Wilmer is just one of the finest minds that's out there in Washington. I miss him, and I miss you working together. It was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. Those were the days. How long were you with that network? I was with, I think, 5 years.
Yeah, it was 7 years. Wow. 7 years. And you know what? Just yesterday, I had a kind of a prominent whistleblower with whom I've been talking, declined to come on my show because I once had been with Sputnik.
Really?
Yeah. How do you like that?
That's unfortunate.
And forgive me for taking up a little bit of time, but I'll repeat what I've said many times on the air. When I was first approached by Sputnik about having a show, I turned them down. And they came back to me about 8 months later and offered another, time, a show. And I said, well, listen, the only way I would do a show is if I could say anything I wanted and criticize anybody I wanted, including Vladimir Putin. And the general manager said, done. Yeah. And I said, would you put that in writing? And he said, yes.
People don't know that.
People don't know that. Exactly.
I don't think people realize when Ted Rall, when he was talking about trying to get a show on MSNBC, and you can see multiple examples of this.
We talked about this yesterday.
Yeah, he was like, they didn't allow you to criticize Democrats. He talked about how Rachel Maddow is somewhat of a lefty behind the scenes, but on air, of course, she has to toe a particular line. You can listen to Cenk Uygur, Chris the Ball, Ed Schultz. All of these people talk about how either they were fired or had minders on them for the language and the things that they'd say. Hell, Fox News, same thing, or something very similar at the very least. That wasn't my experience, with the exception of maybe when the October 7th happened. That wasn't my experience at all. It's like you.
And on October 7th, they asked us just to go easy.
Yes, they was like, moderate.
Catastrophe, just go easy.
Yeah. But after a week, Israel had already gone beyond the pales. Yeah, at that point, the chains were off. No, I mean, you were very open. Like, it was, all of these people are Americans. You have people who are on the right, who are on the left. If there's any continuity, they're just anti-war, meaning they just don't want wars. But you got to speak your piece. There wasn't this.
I did. And on the day that the Russians moved into Ukraine, Michelle Whitty and I began our show by saying we unreservedly condemn the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We understand the background going back to 2014, but we unreservedly condemn the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We call on Russian troops to withdraw immediately. That's how we started the show, and nobody batted an eye.
I didn't. I got to be honest. At the very beginning, I was shocked that they went in.
Yeah, I was too. Actually.
But what else were they supposed to do? I've asked people this on more than one occasion. You've had the Minsk agreements 1 and 2. What would the U.S. do? The U.S. would have fled Mexico if Mexico had even come close to that. And it wouldn't have been, okay, we're doing one arm behind our back. There would have been a Brezhnev hitting Mexico left and right, over and over and over again. Like, what are they supposed to do? During the Cuban Missile Crisis, we were willing to end the world for our,
Literally.
integrity of the state. They had Minsk 1 and 2. They had the Istanbul agreements. That was after they invaded. We overthrew the government of that country in order to put troops, effectively build up their own military. We were killing ethnic Russian Ukrainians while in the West pretending as if ethnic Russian Ukrainians weren't even Ukrainians.
Exactly.
And so
right.
when Putin was out there begging like a preacher for people to come to Jesus, and all of them say, you don't get security guarantees. What was he supposed to do? I don't know another option for this. Maybe.
And all of this after we repeatedly promised the Russians that NATO would not expand to Russia's borders.
So how can I condemn them going in when I, as an American, knowing what we would do, totally understand where they're coming from?
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah, I've had people from NATO on, and I remember we having this conversation, and I'm like, dude, what do you expect them to do? And, you present it in the context of a Cuban Missile Crisis, or if if Russia knocked over Mexico and put it into the Warsaw Pact, what the hell would the U.S. do? And he's like, hey, you make a good point. No shit, Sherlock, I make a good point. Like,
yes,
they gave you no options. They presented you with a Hobbes choice of either you allow yourself to be militarily surrounded or you invade. Okay.
Yeah. What were the Russians supposed to do? Just throw up their hands and say, well, we tried. I guess we're going to be surrounded by NATO.
A country that has been invaded through Ukraine multiple times.
Yes.
Either by Hitler or even in the First World War. They lost 10 million people in that First World War. They lost 30 million in the second.
That's right.
They're going to be dicey about their borders. It is difficult for me to condemn. It puts me in the mind of like when parents, when school teachers, two people get into a fight and they punish both. And it's like, yeah, but both didn't start that. One of them started.
That's right.
Oh, I don't know. Yes, I don't like the military action. Fair enough. By the same token, I don't know another option. I'm not bright enough to think of another option. Yeah. So I don't know. John, I brought you on because there's something, I don't want to get your take on something. So recently, Donald Trump, why do I have Jean-Claude Van Damme on Twitter? All right, let's move past Jean-Claude Van Damme. So recently, Donald Trump said something like Putin's gone crazy because Russia had launched, I think it was like 300 different strikes. I mean, they were pounding the hell out of Ukraine for like multiple days. But this comes after Ukraine had launched like 1,000 missiles or 1,000 drones and whatnot over the course of like 1 week.
Deeper into Russia than had ever been done before.
Yes, because they decided we don't have manpower, so we will just have drone war.
And the Germans last Wednesday lifted the restriction on how deep into Russia German drones can be used. So
Merz backtracked on that. Well, two things. Yes, they did. But two, they're not giving the Taurus missiles.
Yeah, right. So
it's kind of like, yeah, we've listed this restriction. And then Merz was like, yeah, but they were already attacking Russia anyway. Okay, dude, you know exactly what you were saying, right? You put up a trial balloon and Russia has pointed out something that Putin said before. We will attack Germany. Don't F with us. And Merz was like, hey, we're not giving them the missiles. Now the question becomes, because that means Merz lied, because he strongly implied that the missiles had already gone to Ukraine and that they could use those missiles. And then he was like, well, we haven't given them the missiles. We're not going to give it to them yet.
I think he's lying now. I think he's lying now.
The missiles?
You know, I just got back from Europe. I was in Europe for 3 weeks talking about these very issues.
Yeah.
And I met with a whole bunch of parliamentarians from both the UK and Greece. And it's funny, in Greece, where they're much more strongly leftist, they support Donald Trump 1,000%. I've even written about it because it's just so nuts to me.
Really?
In the UK, where they're more right-wing, even the Socialist Party is really, a center-right party. They are 1,000% pro-Ukraine.
Yes.
So it's like this role reversal. I think that the Europeans are so panicked that Donald Trump really is going to cut off aid to Ukraine that they're already backfilling. And so when Merz says we're sending missiles to Ukraine, oh, no, we're not sending missiles to Ukraine, he lied the second time. I think the missiles have gone to Ukraine.
They already got him.
I think they already got them. And besides missiles, they're already getting drones too. Remember Donald Trump complained 3 or 4 weeks ago about how long the United States could continue using $100,000 missiles to knock down $10,000 drones.
Right.
Well, it's the same issue in Ukraine, where these drones are cheap and they're plentiful, and they're what are colloquially known as suicide drones. So they're not like big Predators or Reapers that are carrying 500-pound missiles. And no, they've got explosives on them. And your job as the drone operator is just to crash them into a target. They're not meant to launch and come back. They're meant to just crash into the target and blow up. Those are cheap and they're easy to handle. And so I think that's what the Europeans are providing the Ukrainians right now, in the absence or in the anticipated absence of continued U.S. military assistance.
I agree with you. The Taurus missile thing, I also agree with you, because either he lied in the first thing or lied the second time.
Second, that's right.
And, he's getting hit for basically being contradictory.
And you notice there was no complaint that came from the Ukrainians after he made the second statement. There was no reason to complain because they already have the missiles.
Well, I hope Germany is prepared to get hit, because Russia.
I know, right? But Putin won't hit Germany, because an attack on Germany, like an attack on Poland that everybody was talking about a year ago, is an attack on every NATO country. And so the United States would have to come in, and the war will be so much broader and so much deeper. And you have nuclear powers going head to head. Even Putin wouldn't risk doing it.
Yeah, but the problem is that the moment that it's kind of like it's the nose under the camel's tent, right?
Sure.
Like, if that's under that matter, though, if that's true, then Brits can go into Ukraine. The French can go into Ukraine.
No.
Oh, that's right, because that's on Ukrainian soil.
Right.
I guess my point is, it's a nose under the camel's tent. The moment that you allow a few troops in, you allow 1,000, then 20,000 is in. If you allow one missile to hit Moscow, then you've allowed 20 missiles to hit Moscow.
But don't forget that it was the Soviet Union that was providing weapons to the North Vietnamese during the Vietnam War to be used against U.S. troops and U.S. bases. This is what countries do. They fight these proxy wars. And the other side is always very careful not to provoke and then widen the scope of the conflict. What the Russian response, I think, will be, probably has been, but we don't know it yet, is going to be through intelligence operations. Sabotage, for example, intelligence collection on the ground, trying to infiltrate the NATO militaries. This is something the Russians historically have been very, very good at. And I think that's what they're likely doing right now, absent an actual military response against a NATO country.
Oh, but see, John, that presents a problem, because Putin has already come out and say, if you do this, we will hit your... Now, to be fair, what the guy said was effectively, we will hit that factory that is doing that. And he said outside of, let's say, Berlin or somewhere, basically, we will hit wherever that factory is. And if this continues, we will hit closer to home.
Yeah,
now,
he won't. He won't.
Okay, now this presents a problem then. Because the moment that they test Putin on this and he doesn't respond, they're going to say, see, we knew he wasn't serious.
Yeah.
And they already think that pragmatism is weakness.
Yes.
And if they think pragmatism is weakness, then that's how wars start.
Yes. See, and this is exactly why Donald Trump is so frustrated that Vladimir Putin simply won't do what he tells him to do. When Trump said during the campaign that he could end this war in 24 hours, he didn't mean literally 24 hours, but he meant in relatively quick fashion, he could end this conflict because he has this relationship with Putin. They can speak frankly with each other, and he can force the Ukrainians to, accept terms of a peace deal. And then both sides told him, go fly a kite.
Yeah,
There
but
was
losers
this,
don't get to dictate terms. I like this notion that Donald Trump could come in as a participant in the war, by the way.
yes. That's right.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I interrupted. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. He had this 2-hour conversation with Putin last weekend. And then what was fascinating to me was the press release that came after the conversation, where, you know, the White House said, oh, it was 2 hours long. It was substantive. It was a beautiful conversation, and so much progress was made. And it was just incredible. And they both agreed to different things. And then the Russians came out and said, yeah, they talked for 2 hours. Nothing was settled. We have to believe the Russian side on that, because the war, if anything, things got worse after the telephone call. I mean, it's great that we're talking. We should be talking. That's what diplomacy is all about.
Yeah.
But you can't impose. You're exactly right. If you're the losing side, you cannot impose the terms of a peace deal on the victor. You can't. Now, I will admit to you, Jamal, one thing. We've said from the beginning, many of us, you, me, everybody else that I know, said at the end of this thing, the Russians are going to have territory that had belonged to Ukraine. It's going to be the Donbass. It's going to be Crimea. Right. That Ukraine will never be allowed to join NATO, but they probably will be fast-tracked into the European Union. That's essentially what Trump offered Putin. And Putin said, not good enough.
That's not really what he offered. I mean, Trump was saying stuff like, we're going to put U.S. troops in Zaporozhye nuclear power plant.
Yeah.
I mean, and let's be honest.
That was nonsensical, though.
I know, but even this notion of having Redeemer Force or peacekeepers that were effectively NATO in Ukraine, something that they already said was a
non-starter.
Again, all of these things were non-starters. And it's pretending as if he's a trustworthy actor. He's not.
He's not. He's a belligerent.
Yeah.
One of the things I learned at the CIA very early on was that the United States and the United Nations very frequently turn to Fiji to provide peacekeeping troops, because nobody hates the Fijians. Nobody could even find Fiji on a map. I hate to say, I'm a map nut and I couldn't point out Fiji on a map.
Yeah, I have a hard time
and this is a major form of income for the Fijian government. They have peacekeeping troops all over the world. I think at the end of the day, I think at the end of the day, we're probably going to see 1,000 or 1,500 Fijians in the Donbass.
Oh, I'm skeptical. I think this is going to be settled on the battlefield. I think Trump is going to say, I think all of you are horrible people. I think he's going to say, I'm calling it a day. I don't know if he continues to sell weapons and stuff to Ukraine. It depends on who can manipulate him the most in regards to
yeah,
who he believes
that's it. Because he's got members of Congress pushing him the opposite direction. This is going to be tough for him.
It is. And so he's doing this fence sitting thing of, oh, Putin, he's playing with fire. And Mendevev points out, dude, the only fire you're playing with is World War III. Don't F around.
That's what this comes down to.
You have no cards.
Mm-hmm.
You have nothing that you can do in this situation. Your sanctions have failed miserably. You have no capacity to do anything on the ground.
This ought to be a lesson for everybody, that sanctions don't work. They've never worked. Never. And so this is something I feel very strongly about. We need to get away from. I'm sorry if I change the subject a little bit, but you mentioned sanctions. I think this is important. Last week, there was a huge press event in Iran. And it's like everybody I know went to Iran except me. Max Blumenthal and Judge Napolitano and everybody I know was in Iran last. Yeah, I missed the boat on this. But anyway, Max yesterday was on the Tucker Carlson show. And he said exactly what I've been saying, that sanctions have had literally zero impact in Iran. It's made the Iranians utterly self-sufficient. They produce literally everything they need. Everything. You need tennis shoes? They make beautiful tennis shoes, better than the ones we get because they're made out of leather and they're sewn instead of glued. I know because a dear friend of mine has a pair she bought when she was last there. I've got at least a half a dozen shirts that say "Made in Iran" on the tag. They're of the highest quality. They need auto parts. They manufacture the auto parts. You need to dredge the port. If you can't do it yourself, you ask the Russians or the Chinese to do it. Easy. Sanctions don't work. They're not going to work in Russia, just like they haven't worked in Iran or in Cuba or in Venezuela or anywhere else. And we need to get more into the business of conducting diplomacy,
right?
Which is hard work. It's a hell of a lot easier just to call the Treasury Secretary and say, impose sanctions on XYZ country than it is to actually engage that country in diplomatic talks over the course of a year or 2 or 10. But we should take a lesson from Iran that sanctions don't work, and we should move away from this stupid idea of sanctions vis-a-vis Russia.
What was the event?
You know, it was this international press thing. I have a friend, a Greek-American friend who lives in Greece, and I was going to be on his show, and then he said, hey, can we wait a couple of weeks? I need to do this press event in Iran. I said, oh, Iran, hey, have a great time. I'd love to go to Iran. And then I happen to watch Max Blumenthal, and there's Max in Iran. And then here's Aaron Mate, and he's in Iran. And Judge Napolitano's doing his show from Iran. And then Ray McGovern goes from Moscow, where he met with Putin, to Iran. I'm like, what the heck am I missing over here? And Max is like standing in front of the doors of a synagogue in Tehran saying, look at all these Jewish Iranians that are going into their synagogue with freedom of religion. Then he goes to an Armenian church in Tehran. Look at all these Christians are practicing their faith. And he's interviewing Iranian governmental leaders, and he's going around town with Mohammad Morandi. And it's like, oh my God, I really missed the boat here. Nobody invited me.
The China Iranian rail opening, because I know that opened, I think it was a couple of days ago.
That's another thing. That's another thing. See, and this is pulling out of the JCPOA was just an awful mistake, because the JCPOA called for the lifting of trade sanctions,
right,
with every country that was a signatory. So the UK, France, Germany, Japan, they all lifted sanctions on Iran. The United States, we started trading with Iran, and then we unilaterally pull out of the JCPOA, and all these other countries are saying, no. You told us that we could trade with Iran. Just because you decided to change your minds with a change in administration doesn't mean that we have to abide by American policy. We like trading with Iran. And so the Brits, the French, the Germans, the Japanese, the Russians, the Chinese, the Indians, they're all trading with Iran. The Iranians have everything they need. They don't need us. They don't have any incentive to bow down to us. We blew it on that. Donald Trump blew it on that.
Donald Trump is blowing on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, fact of the matter is, when this first started, he should have just walked away, said, this is Joe Biden's war.
Yes, that's exactly right.
And now this is effectively his war. I think what I was trying to get at has to do with the secondary question that was asked of Donald Trump after him saying Putin is crazy and everything else. Yeah. And his comment bugs me, because it's like, dude, you have a video on Twitter where you are chest thumping, murdering maybe, let's say, 30 Yemenis, civilians, who are at what is called El Fitar celebration, that you are calling terrorists. There's not a gun in sight. None of these people are terrorists. They're just civilians. And you murdered more people in that one strike than the Russians did in hundreds of strikes all across Ukraine, who hit, I think, like killed 13 people.
Yes.
And it's not to minimize 13 people. It's trying to make the point of, in the context of the number of strikes.
Yes.
You've killed more in one strike. You've blown up apartment buildings to get one guy, killing more people in that strike. And he's like, Putin's just gone crazy.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, dude, calm down. Right. But it was the secondary question that asked them, where they said, hey, you realize that they nearly tried to take Putin down in a helicopter, right? And he says, I didn't hear anything about that. Yeah. Now, for one, it is very possible that it was Western intelligence that gave him the information on Putin's whereabouts. There's that. So it's very possible that Trump did know, and he just lied, because Trump lies as easily as he breathes. Two, even if he didn't know, the Russians have been running with this idea over and over again that Trump is being filtered. Trump is not getting all of the information. Trump is being managed. He's being
Yes.
maneuvered. He's being, and I was talking back and forth with Maloof about this. And I was kind of going at Maloof saying, dude, A, I don't know if that's true because Trump lies as easily as he breathes. Two, if it is true, he still hired those people. Trump was in office once before. And so the idea that he didn't know that he would be managed and maneuvered by the people around him is nonsense. People are policy. You chose the people to put in your administration. It's still on you any way you look at it. What's interesting to me, though, is in two fronts. One, the Russian front. And two, this front of whether or not he's managed and maneuvered. Give me your take on that. I mean, for one, you were during the Bush administration.
Mm-hmm.
Was Bush being managed?
Oh, yeah.
What does it even look like?
Oh, yeah.
Is Trump being managed now? Meaning,
Right.
is he just incurious where he doesn't ask any particular question? And if he doesn't ask, they don't tell because they don't want him to know anyway. Like, what does that look like in practice? Like, are the Russians right that the information is being filtered to him in a way where he legitimately may not know what's happening day to day?
I think that's the case. I think that's
You really
case.
think that's the case, that he just doesn't know?
We saw it this weekend. When a reporter asked him a question related to Russia.
Question.
And pardon me?
It was that question where they said, hey, they nearly took down Putin's helicopter.
Exactly. And he said, didn't hear anything about it.
Didn't hear anything about it.
It's because he wasn't briefed. He's being ill-served. Now, some might argue that it's because he fired 400 staff members from the National Security Council last week.
It could be that.
It could be that. It could be that he's being managed. I doubt it because that's a little bit too sophisticated for the staff that's left.
Yeah.
But I think we're in a period of chaos at the National Security Council right now, and he just simply wasn't briefed. I think, and there's not even a national security advisor. It's Marco Rubio as acting national security advisor. We haven't had a person be Secretary of State and national security advisor since Henry Kissinger in 1975, and that doesn't work.
I saw it on Twitter.
Yeah, but
How could he not know?
I
He's
think
on Twitter all the
he
time.
doesn't read Twitter so much as he writes on Twitter. I mean it. I hate to say that, but I think that he's busy writing and tweeting and truth socialing and not really reading what other people are reporting. Let me give you an example, too, a real life example. I just talked about this day before yesterday on a show. In late 2001, the CIA had come up with a torture program. And the CIA wrote a presidential finding that the Justice Department approved and the National Security Advisor, Condi Rice, approved. So all they needed to implement the torture program was the president's signature on it. George Tenet took the draft finding to the White House for the president's signature, and he ran into Dick Cheney in the anteroom of the Oval Office. Cheney said, "George, what are you doing here?" George said, "I've got the draft finding on enhanced interrogation for the president's signature." And Cheney said, "Oh, I'll take it. I'll get the president to sign it." George said, "No, that's okay. The president's expecting me. I'll get the president to sign it." Cheney says, "No, I'll get the president to sign it." And George left. So until the Senate torture report was released in 2014, 13 years later, we always just assumed that George W. Bush had knowingly approved of the torture program.
Oh my God. Are you serious?
And now historians are saying George W. Bush may not have known anything about the torture program. That it was Dick Cheney that either had it auto-penned or asked the president to sign it without telling him what it was. So when George W. Bush claimed ignorance in 2000, when did I blow the whistle? 2007, when he said, "I don't know this man. I don't know this man's motivation. I don't know why this man threw me under the bus." I've come to the belief that maybe Bush didn't know that he had approved a torture program. Oftentimes, Jamal, presidents are cut out. Now that's the definition of a deep state right there.
That's astonishing.
Yeah, it's sick.
That's astonishing. I mean, I heard Bush I did hear something about that where Bush was like, hell yeah, waterboard him. But this was like after the fact when he didn't want to feel like he was behind the
Yes.
baseball.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that story.
Yeah, it's ugly.
So I guess to put a button in this, it is indeed possible that if the president is not curious, if the president doesn't want to know, that the American public on Twitter could be more informed
Yes.
than his staff and even the president himself.
Yes, it is absolutely true. Look at the Clinton administration. In his 8 years as president, Bill Clinton was briefed by the CIA 3 times.
That's it.
Al Gore was briefed 6 days a week for 8 years. It was Al Gore running intelligence and foreign policy, not
So
Bill
it was
Clinton.
filtered through Al Gore. Whatever was going to go to Bill Clinton. Wow.
Now Gore was good at it, right? So Clinton handled Iraq and initiated talks with the North Koreans and pushed the Middle East peace process. So Gore was good at it, at keeping the president fully briefed. But some people aren't, and some presidents just aren't curious.
John, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
That's deeply unfortunate. Because for my take, it was, and I don't have time to get to the other part, but the other thought was, whether it's true or not, the Russians is trying to save face for Trump. Because at the very least, they want to keep the charade up that he is a mediator, because they believe that they can get more out of him if he can be managed, as opposed to, let's say, some other rando that may take over after Trump. Like, meaning they're trying to get what they can get out of it now,
Yes.
as opposed to what may come after Trump
That's
leaves.
right.
Wow.
That's right.
John, you are, I swear, man, the stories that you have in the life that you have led is just fascinating.
I got to
John
write them
Kiriakou,
all down.
yeah, former CIA officer, also host of Deep Focus. He's also with Ted Rawl on Deep Program. Definitely check him out. By the way, John, when are those shows? When do they air?
We are in the process this week of making them at the same time every week. So Deep Focus, we're looking at Tuesday, Thursday. And Ted and I, we did one yesterday. We're doing one Saturday, but we're going to go Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Okay. All right. I'm going to put it in my calendar, so you need to stick with the schedule.
Thank
you. You have a good one, man. You be safe.
You too, buddy.
Oh, by the way, are you still doing the events over the course through Europe?
Yeah, I intend to spend most of July in the UK. I've got 38 dates in UK. I've already done 10. So we're going to try to finish up the UK in July. And then we were going to go to Australia and New Zealand right after that. We decided to go across the United States instead. And then I'll do Australia and New Zealand in the fall.
Badass. You have a good one, my man. Thank you for this. I
You
really
too.
appreciate it.
Take care of yourself.
All right. I would like to get just the man is fascinating. I want to go to my next guest, and I'm happy that he can join me. I am joined with, and I want to pronounce this correctly because I had this screwed up in the calendar. I fixed this in the calendar, by the way. Robert Fatima. Did I get that right? I want to make sure I got that right.
Good. It's Fantina.
Fantina.
Right.
Okay, Robert Fantina. Thank you, Robert Fantina. He is an author, journalist, activist, working for peace and social justice. He is author of the book Settler Colonialism in Palestine and Kashmir. By the way, Robert, do you have a new book coming out or anything like that? I ask because I always want to make sure the calendar is up to date.
Nothing new. I'm working on my PhD right now, and when I finish that, there'll be a book.
Are you?
Yes.
I know some people don't like to talk about what their books, documentaries, PhDs are on, but can I ask what that's on? If you could tell me.
I like talking about it. Yes, I'm studying. It's a sociology department, and I'll be studying and I'm researching the lived experiences and motivations of pro-Palestine activists during the current genocide. So I'm exploring why people in Southern Ontario, where I live, have decided to come out for Palestine at this time.
Interesting. Oh, that's super interesting.
Thank you.
You know,
Thank you.
when I was in, this was like a decade ago. It was forever ago, but I was in Israel, and this was when I was kind of like traveling through various areas, and not various areas of Israel, but it was going through like Egypt. I just so happened to cross into Israel in order to get to Jordan, et cetera, and kept moving that way. I ran into this woman who was Belgian Palestinian. And we went through, I think we were in Bethlehem, where she was working as an obstetrician. So she was helping this kind of prenatal clinic or natal clinic.
Mm-hmm.
And her thing was, I want you to see what this looks like. Basically, I want you to see what the reality is for people on the ground. Blew my mind.
Mm-hmm.
It just blew my mind. They didn't treat me any particular way as an American. Of course, I had earrings, tattoos. They just said they would they would say like, he's an American, and it's like, oh, okay. And it would just be that.
Right.
One guy starts screaming at her because she didn't have her hijab on, and she turns around and attacks the guy. She was ferocious, and she was ferocious towards Israelis, but also to people who were trying to put her in a corner.
Right.
Even in the area. Oh, it was fascinating. As an American, you could just stroll through to get through the checkpoints.
Mm-hmm.
You could not do that. As Palestinians, that line was going back for hours.
Right.
Bus,
Criminal.
at the time, they stopped the bus driver because he didn't have the correct papers, in which case they carted him away, took him in a van and carted him off. In perfect English, he says, hey, we apologize. Your next guy will come on. Like, it's a bizarre experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard for people to wrap their heads around, dude, it's an apartheid state. And, they speak
Undeniable.
English. No, please.
But it's undeniable that's apartheid. That's been documented not only by Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, but Salem, which is an Israeli-based human rights organization. That organization says it's an apartheid state. So there's no denying it. A lot of world leaders want to deny it, but people around the world see it for what it really is.
Yeah. It's a hell of an experience.
Mm-hmm.
My ex-wife and I went once, and that was the first time she had ever been. She's not political. She's not into any of this stuff. I had a stick in my ass the entire time I was there because I was like, I do not want to be back here. I don't want to be spending money here. I don't want to be like, that was just my point of view at that point, right? Because at that point, I'm doing a channel. I'm doing news. And it was only when we left, we went to the Holocaust Museum. And when we were on our way out, she says, if they came here, who was here before they got here? And it clicked, right? Like it finally dawned on her, like, oh, right, these guys with guns. There's a reason they have guns. Right. Oh, right, these people who are going to these checkpoints. There's a reason that those things are there because somebody else was here when they got here. Like it's just a wild experience. If anybody has ever the chance to go.
And there's the expression a lot of Zionists use, a people without land. What is it? A land without people and a people without land.
Yeah.
Well, that's because they don't consider Palestinians people.
Yeah.
750,000 Palestinians were driven out of Palestine when the state of Israel was created. Another 10,000 were killed at that time. It's 1948. And it's been ongoing ever since then. And it's been on steroids since October of 2023.
We have been pushing this for the last, I guess, year and a half that this is a genocide.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems that we have gained a new ally on this front. And Lord knows if you've lost this guy, then you've lost the narrative. I'm going to play this clip for you and I'm going to get your take on this. I'm fascinated by this just at the turnaround because this guy has fought this fight against this notion of this being a genocide. I mean, browbeating guests, say October 7th was horrible, say October 7th was horrible. And now Piers Morgan is saying this.
But you said there were 50,000 Hamas. Others have put the total figure at around 25,000, which begs the question, if after 18, 19 months now, you have been waging this ferocious war against 25, 26,000 terrorists, and you still haven't defeated them, your strategy is failing. How many children have you killed?
Piers, Israel is not
Well, how
killing
many?
children. Israel is not killing children. Hamas is using them as
Israel is
human
killing
shields.
children every single day. And what you're trying to do is be very weaselly with your words.
No, I'm not.
The truth is, you are killing a lot of children.
You
would
know
argue
that,
you're
you know why it's caused?
Hang on, let me
because
finish.
Hamas is using them as human shields, and you know
Let me
that.
finish my question to you. You are killing a lot of children on a daily basis. That is indisputable. My interesting question for you is, how come you know exactly how many Hamas terrorists you've killed, but you have no idea how many children you've killed?
You've lost Piers Morgan.
Right.
Something's
You've
wrong.
lost. Yeah.
Yeah.
But his his arguments, of course, are very good. And she's saying about Hamas using children as human shields. Children are being killed in apartment buildings where they're living with dozens of other families, and it's being bombed. That's not a human shield. And it's been documented that Israeli soldiers are using Palestinians as human shields. That's easily documented. So yeah, Piers Morgan coming around to this way of thinking, that is extraordinary, as you say.
Kicking and screaming, by the way, kicking and screaming.
Right,
Kicking and screaming the entire way. Like, I mean, talking about dragging a horse to the water. But what I brought you on, and bring you on for Piers. What I brought you on for was because there was this, I got annoyed on Twitter, and I often get annoyed on Twitter. I need to stop. But it came out that Witkoff, I'll just say Witkoff. I don't trust Witkoff at this point to save
Of course
my
not.
life. But Witkoff comes out. Initially, there was a deal, apparently, that was negotiated between the U.S. and Witkoff. Hamas agrees to the deal. Israel doesn't. Witkoff turns around and, of course, blames Hamas.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So apparently, they say, hey, guess what? We have a new deal. This is Witkoff with Trump putting the cart before the horse, I would argue, and announcing this deal coming up.
I think that we are on the precipice of sending out a new term sheet. Later on today, the president is going to review it, and I have some very good feelings about getting to a long-term resolution, temporary ceasefire, and a long-term resolution, a peaceful resolution of that conflict.
All right. So right off the bat, temporary ceasefire, long-term resolution. All right. Now, when you go to Hamas, their document is weirdly enough different, because what they say that they agreed upon was this: permanent ceasefire. Drops like news, very top line. Permanent ceasefire, full withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza, immediate aid flow, appointment of professional committee to manage Gaza post-deal. The agreement also includes the release of 10 Israeli captives and several bodies in exchange for an agreed-upon number of Palestinian prisoners and mediator guarantees. Now, my issue with this is that this makes no sense. And it doesn't just make no sense to me from the standpoint of these two differences in the way Hamas is talking about it and the way Witkoff is talking about it. It's even the way Netanyahu has been talking. Netanyahu says they're not coming back. And in fact, Trump and Netanyahu are working together to put those people in pens. You could see it when the mercenaries or the Israeli soldiers, I don't know which one, was shooting at the hungry, starving people, that they were effectively using starvation in order to force those people into camps. Like, meaning these two things are contradictory to one another. And if it's contradictory, my assumption is that Israel is going to say, you're out of your mind. We've already said they're not coming back. We've already said that we're putting them in pens for the entire point of getting rid of them. So why are you saying that we are withdrawing Israelis from the region when we told you that we're not doing that? Give me a take on it. What am I missing on this? Am I missing something? That seems to be a complete contradiction between what Israel has been saying for the last, I don't know, several months versus what Witkoff and Hamas are saying that they've fundamentally agreed to, even though what Witkoff is saying is different than what Hamas is saying right off the bat.
It's the break is between the U.S. and Israeli positions in reality. The Palestinian people are never going to give up their country. That's just not going to happen. They're not going to agree to anything that says Israel will continue to indefinitely occupy Gaza, and the Palestinians in Gaza will be eventually moved out of the country to some other undisclosed location. This is not going to happen. Now, what Israel is saying, it's willing to do a temporary ceasefire to get some hostages back, because in Israel, there is a tremendous press, a lot of pressure on Israel and on Netanyahu and his government to bring the hostages home. People in Israel who are avowed Zionists and who hate Palestinians want this to end, want a ceasefire so the hostages can return. The right-wing government that Netanyahu leads, and that he has to rely on several of those extremely radical and racist members to keep him propped up, They don't want that. They don't care about the hostages. They just want all of Palestine. And so this is where there's a disconnect. This is not going to be resolved by the United States, which has Israel's best interests at heart and doesn't care about the Palestinians at all. The United States has never been and never will be an honest broker in the conflict between Israel and Palestine. Now, what we're going to be hearing in the next several days, when there's no deal, is that Hamas is not agreeing, that there's a deal on the table. Israel agrees, the United States says it's good, and Hamas, the terrorist group, is refusing. Well, what they're going to refuse is to give up their country to a foreign enemy that wants to kill those that are remaining. So they're not being unreasonable. They're rejecting a very, very unreasonable offer that no country's leader, no military leader, no political leader would ever agree to.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think what's also being missed in this is Hamas has been trying to get a deal for the last, 6 months, if not longer. Mm-hmm. Like they've gotten to the point where they are willing to accept almost anything. So it's not them that is rejecting this stuff. It is effectively, any fair deal they'll accept. Hell, any unfair deal they'll accept.
Well, as long as it doesn't give up their country. And,
right.
And who is the reasonable player here? There was a ceasefire deal during that time from January to about March. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians returned to the north because that was their home. They were driven out of. They thought this is going to be the end. We can go back. We can start to rebuild. Mm-hmm. And then during the ceasefire, there was supposed to be further negotiations to bring about a permanent end to this, which would be withdrawal of the Israeli forces and the rebuilding of Gaza. Well, who violated that? It wasn't the Palestinians that violated it. It wasn't Hamas that violated it. It was Israel that violated it. And then added to the violation, the war crime of starvation as a weapon of war. And the world is sitting back and saying, oh, Israel, you shouldn't be doing that. Here's some more weapons to do it with.
Yeah. Yeah. And the Trump administration effectively looking the other way, mm-hmm. which is, I don't want to say game, but that's what the jig is up, right? I mean, if you always have the situation where it doesn't matter what Israel does, mm-hmm. it only matters. Hell, it doesn't matter what Hamas does. If Israel says we don't want it, you're going to blame Hamas anyway. This is what Joe Biden was doing, and this is what Trump is doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like we're going to come to a deal. We're going to agree upon a deal. We're going to shake hands on this deal. We're going to violate it, and we're not going to say anything about the fact that Israel is violating the deal. And then the same thing happens again, and we're not going to say anything about Israel violating the deal, and then it happens again. Meaning, you have this constant creep where it seems like the entire point of it is to move you further along the path that Israel wants, with the U.S. pretending as if it's doing deals, when in actuality, there seems to be a scheme running behind the scenes. I mean, and I don't even think it's behind the scenes at this point. Correct me if I'm wrong. Trump has already said that the objective is to eject the people from the area. Netanyahu has said the objective is to eject the people out of the area. Starvation is just a tool that they're using to try to accomplish that objective with.
Right, and if the people won't leave, they'll die. So that's the choice that the United States and Israel are giving the people of Palestine in Gaza: leave or die. And this is not. How is that reason? How is that not a war crime? How is the rest of the Western world? We know Trump is completely off the rails. He always has been. But why is the rest of the world following along? Now, we have heard some very strong warnings from the German government, which is very surprising because the German government still thinks it needs to make amends for a government that hasn't been in office for 80 or 90 years. But the recent statements by German government officials are that Israel has to stop doing this and they're going to take action if it doesn't. Canada's saying the same thing. France is saying the same thing. But talk is cheap. They have to do some actions. You can't look to the United States. As I mentioned earlier, the United States is not, never has been, and never will be an honest broker in this situation. Other countries need to step forward and take concrete, definite steps to stop Israel from what it's doing. This is sanctions. This is no further arms, complete arms embargo, cutting business ties, cutting academic ties, making the Israeli economy, which is in big trouble as it is, but really collapsing it. So the people are going to force their own government to take action. But they're trying, some of them, there have been massive demonstrations in Israel and Tel Aviv and other cities for months now. But the government, Netanyahu wants to stay out of prison. And if he leaves government, then he'll go to trial. The trial's been kind of ongoing, but he's been too busy for it, too busy committing genocide. So other countries in the world have to take action. They're not. As I said, talk is cheap. They've got to do something.
I am curious on your take on this. Why do you think that Europe has come around? I mean, look, let's be honest. The starvation thing has been going on for months. I mean, even going back to the Biden administration. If you remember, just before the DNC convention, Joe Biden said something to the effect of, basically, he was trying to get a deal at the last minute so he can go out on stage and says, excuse me, look at this deal that I've received. Look at this deal that I've been able to accomplish. And even before that, though, part of the thing that he was trying to do is say, okay, well, we want, I think he said 300 trucks coming in. Now, 300 trucks wasn't even going to be enough, but that's what the Biden administration was trying to get them to agree to. They got like 30 at the most.
Right.
And so I guess my point is, even the US government at that point was writing reports talking about Palestinians being starved. And the Biden administration under Blinken basically put the kibosh on that report. Those people quit in protests. My point is, this starvation has been going on for months on end. It hasn't just started. So why is Europe Johnny come lately and it's like, oh, it seems that you are now starving the Palestinians. They've been starving them. So why now are they all of a sudden piping up with complaints?
A couple of points I want to make. Apparently, a few days ago, 8 trucks were let in. 8 trucks for 2.5 million starving people. So now, what we're seeing in news reports, there's been an easing of the blockade. 8 trucks is an insult. It's ridiculous. But as far as why the European countries are finally coming around, if you look at the reactions of people in these countries, there have been massive demonstrations continually. When the genocide started in October 2023, that might have been expected, but they have not stopped. In London, hundreds of thousands, up to 1 million people demonstrating. This is happening in France and Canada, where I live. There are constant demonstrations. And also surveys in Germany show that the sympathy of the German people is with the Palestinians, no longer with the Israelis. So this is the German government has got to finally say, if we want to stay in power, there's going to be an election at some point in the future, and we've got to do what the people want us to do. And financing and endorsing and supporting genocide is not on their list. So I think that's where we're seeing a change. The people in the world have so much power and they just don't know it.
So you think effectively the governments are responding to public will?
Well, they're starting to. If they were responding, there'd be arms embargoes instead of just talks of arms embargoes. But at least it's a start. But while this is starting, Palestinians are still dying of starvation, still being burned to death in their tents by bombs. They're being bombed in hospitals, in UN refugee centers, in schools. The journalists continue to be slaughtered. So Germany, France, Canada, and other countries are starting to speak up strongly. But speaking up strongly doesn't count. What counts is action.
See, I don't buy that they are speaking. Okay. Yes, they are saying stuff, but so did Joe Biden say stuff. So did Trump. Oh my God, the Palestinians. It's so horrible to see people die of starvation. Okay, yeah, but dude, you're paying for that starvation.
Exactly.
70, 80%. So how can I take you as being serious when you say, oh my God, the starvation is so bad, right? Like, I don't know if I take what they're saying seriously. I think what's going on is they are responding to what the public sentiment changing. But I think they're responding in the same way that Joe Biden was dealing with the Democrats, with this kind of image management of, we like our little European-esque colony in the Middle East. We like that. We want that colony to expand. We know what it's like to have colonies because we're Europe. We had colonies all over the world, right? America, hell, that's a colony. Australia, India, all of these places were colonies. And so we get the brutal realities of what it means to colonize a certain area. And we're okay with that. However, our public is not. And so we need to give some kind of image management for that. Like, meaning I don't buy that the leaders of these countries that have watched all of this play out for over, a year and a half, 2 years, every day on social media, and all of a sudden has now come to the conclusion, you know what? We think starvation at this level is too far. I don't buy the premise.
I don't buy the premise either. I think they still don't care. They want the things you want. They like having that European-like colony in the Middle East. They get intelligence, they get technological advances and so on, and they like that. It's especially for the United States, it's an entity that will keep an eye on other Middle Eastern countries and let them know what's happening. They don't want to give that up. They don't care about human rights. They don't care about international law. Even the current German leadership has said during a recent election they would invite Netanyahu to their country, despite the fact that by law, if he sets foot in Germany, they should arrest him.
Yep.
Because there's a warrant for his arrest. But they said they're going to violate that. So what does it say about international law? But also these countries that are making statements, as you said, image management, which I think is a good term for that, because they want to show their people, the voters, oh, we are doing something. Yes, we hear you. We feel you. We feel your pain, this sort of thing. And then they can say, oh, because of our statements, there are more trucks coming into Gaza now. Yeah, 8.
All 8 of them.
all 8 of them, right? Which is, it's an insult. So this is, I hope the public isn't going to buy it. They're going to say, 8 trucks, they need thousands every day coming in. And when people like Trump say, oh, we're working with the Israelis and encouraging them to bring in more humanitarian aid, that, as you said, has no validity to it because the United States is financially supporting the deprivation of the Palestinians, food for the Palestinians, financially supporting the bombs. It's giving Israel the bombs it needs. During the Biden administration, billions of dollars in bombs.
Yes.
More bombs have been dropped on Gaza, the tiny area of Gaza, than were dropped during the entirety of World War II by all sides.
That is hard to wrap your head around, by the way.
It is. And these 2.5 million people have nowhere to go. And all they can do is wait to die.
How many people live in Germany at the time of the Second World War? We're talking about millions of people. And this is more bombs being dropped on 2 million people in a pen, no less, like in a concentrated open-air ghetto than was over all of Germany during the Second World War. That is hard to wrap your head around.
There are no safe shelters. There is no place that is safe. With people that I'm in contact with in Gaza, when I go online with them on Facebook or some other social media platform, and I can hear the drones, I can hear the bombs, and this is what they have to live with on a daily basis, and they don't know if the next one's going to be on their tent.
Robert, thank you for this great breakdown. Robert Fantina, I want to make sure I get that right.
Perfect.
It's somebody who names gets butchered. That's why I've spent time trying to get it right. Robert Fantina.
Yeah.
He is an author, journalist, art activist working on peace and social justice. He's the author of the new book, Settler Colonialism in Palestine and Kashmir. He is working on his PhD. Soon I'm going to be calling him Dr. Fantina. I look forward to that. You have a good one, man. You be safe, okay?
Thank you. You too.
No, thank you. Have a good one. All right. And the last guest for today, and last but not least, Professor Maloof. I'm going to call him Professor. I'll go with that. No, Michael Maloof. There we are. He is a former senior security policy analyst in the Office of Secretary of Defense, author, and regular contributing analyst on RT and other media outlets. He has nearly 30 years federal service in the U.S. Department of Defense. Welcome to the show, man. How you doing today? You doing okay this morning?
So far, so good.
Good. I'm glad that you could join me.
Thank you.
I just had a conversation with John Kiriakou, and in the conversation with John,
Friend of mine.
yeah, he's cool people. He's good people, right? I asked him about, I was like, hey, you were in the Bush administration. What are the chances of a president being maneuvered, basically being managed or having information filtered, especially with the entire conversation about whether or not Donald Trump is getting all the information? And he pointed me out to this just astonishing scene where Tenet is going to Bush so George Bush can sign the torture document. Basically, yes, I, George Bush, am agreeing with the torture program that I'm going to call the Hens interrogation. And that Dick Cheney meets him, it says, hey, where are you going? He's like, I'm going to see the president. I have the torture document. And Cheney is like, well, I'll take it to him. And Tenet was like, well, no, he's expecting me. And Cheney is like, I will take it to him. Like Darth Vader, like asserts himself. And Tenet's like, okay, here you go. And as John points out, several years later, like 8 years later, come to find out, it is very possible that George Bush didn't realize that he signed a torture document. Mm-hmm. Now, I think it's possible, I suppose, even though George Bush put in his book, I say, hell yeah, waterboard him. But people have pointed out that George Bush seemed to have put that in after the fact because he didn't want to look like an asshole for effectively not reading what he was signing when he was signing it by Dick Cheney. And Dick Cheney might have just said, oh, here's a document we need you to sign for so-and-so and so-and-so, not telling him exactly what was in the document. I just have a hard time believing that they didn't talk about it in advance. And in talking about it in advance, didn't bring up the fact that we are going to call this enhanced interrogation as opposed to, breaking people.
Well, there are many, many stories just like that. Basically, it's my premise based upon my own experiences in the Defense Department at that time that the intelligence community, basically George Tenet in particular, who was a Democrat, basically set up George Bush for failure in Iraq. And it coming out with this whole WMD fiasco, when they originated the intelligence, it wasn't us. And then pushing that down and then making Colin Powell say it before the UN, when we knew, some of us knew, that operationally Iraq did not have WMD. And I would send up emails or memos to that effect at the time. I was in the office of the Secretary of Defense, and so and then I got ostracized because I wasn't a team player. My job was to analyze terrorist groups worldwide, but my office also looked at export controls of items that ultimately had gone to Iraq. We knew where the R&D centers were. We knew where all of the we had done prior to Desert Shield, Desert Storm, the entire WMD networking for Iraq, which was ultimately destroyed in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and then was crisscrossed for 10 years by inspectors. So we knew they had not, and we would occasionally stop stuff that was going into Iraq for a potential WMD program, and we would get that halted. And so we had confidence that the WMD didn't exist. Yet George Tenet comes in October of 2002 with this NIE saying there's weapons of mass destruction, and the next thing we know, he's telling Bush the information's a slam dunk. We're saying, what information? You don't have any concrete information.
But from my understanding, everything that I've read has pointed out that Dick Cheney was pushing the CIA to cherry pick information, like literally cherry picking information. I mean, that goes to the whole Valerie Plame, what is it? Valerie Plame, I believe her name is. Her husband, who was looking at yellow cake uranium in Africa and all stuff, basically saying there is no yellow cake and uranium coming out of Africa in this way.
Well, we were getting that information from the CIA.
Yes.
We were getting that information from the agency. It wasn't made up by DIA. It wasn't made up by the Defense Department.
I guess what I'm getting at is, correct me if I'm wrong, the agency pulls information and correlates it based on what the president wants, or for that matter, what someone in the administration wants. There were even reports that Dick Cheney had his own shadow government running with information in order to cherry pick and choose what he wanted to take versus what he didn't want
I
to.
was involved in briefing one of Cheney's people in the Pentagon on what we had seen in terms of terrorist groups, but not on WMD at the time. I mean, my office had done sufficient amount of information of export controls over the years, and had developed a body of information to know where the WMD was. Prior to Desert Shield, Desert Storm, my office was involved with Customs in raiding the offices down in Florida of a guy from Chile who lived in Florida and was working on Saddam Hussein's WMD programs. And we were able to shut that office down. We pulled all of his information. We were able to use it basically for targeting. We knew where all the targets were. DIA would come to my office for the targeting information in many respects.
Wow.
So it wasn't originating from the intelligence community, is what we had gotten with Customs and law enforcement, and in terms of trying to determine what facilities were engaged in WMD programs, and those became prime targets during Desert Shield, Desert Storm.
What are the chances that the president information going to him is being filtered?
Oh, it's totally. Oh yeah, but when information, you get a good analyst. I mean, I saw it when I worked the Toshiba case years ago, and that's what that case involved, discovering that the then Soviets had stolen stolen machine tools to make highly skewed propellers to silence their submarines. Well, we found that out, and we were able to stop any further exports to that location. But as the case went from intelligence to a policy issue, then even CIA became much more engaged and involved in it, because it affected their assets in the field. And it also had an impact on our foreign policy aspects, because we almost brought down the Japanese government as a result of that case. It was a scandal extraordinary.
Right.
Extraordinaire. It became a real scandal. Almost brought down the government. I had the head of Toshiba Machine Tool threatening suicide out of shame. And seppuku.
Are you serious?
As a heart attack.
Oh, okay. Wow.
I mean, these are the kinds of things we would encounter in our day-to-day jobs.
Just wow. Just wow. Okay, so if the president is getting filtered information,
yeah,
why? As I pointed out,
and that gets to today. What happened just the other day?
Right. Exactly. That's what
I went crazy over it. I went on RT. I was on Sputnik about it, because it's like history repeating itself, thanks to the intelligence community filtering the information and not informing the commander in chief. And that instance had to do with when Trump was on the tarmac on a briefing, or an impromptu press briefing, and he was asked the question. I mean, he was complaining about Putin lobbing missiles into Ukraine, and nobody until some reporter asked, "Well, were you aware that Putin's helicopter was caught up in a swarm of drones heading toward Moscow?" He said, "No, I'm not. I wasn't aware of that." I mean, and days, there had been days separating the time of that swarm and that briefing, that impromptu press conference that he had. which tells me the intelligence community gave him one side of this story, but not the whole story. The critical story, which was the fact that it was in retaliation. And this was also in conjunction with the mainstream media. Mainstream media didn't report Peshkov's comments that it was in retaliation, did not report that for another 3 to 5 days.
But they never do.
So this is serious.
But they shouldn't have to rely on mainstream media. Meaning, you would think the president would be more informed than mainstream media.
But he was not getting it in his daily presidential briefs. He should have.
Yeah.
That this was in retaliation, and that Ukraine had launched a swarm, almost hit, and probably was aimed at the helicopter that Putin was in, which was contrary to an understanding and agreement that both sides had, that you don't shoot down the plane of the leadership of the other.
But it's very possible that the intelligence that they used in order to even target Putin and that was coming out of the West.
Oh, it absolutely was. Sure, either from the UK, the French, or the US, or a combination. Yeah, right. They knew about where that helicopter was going to be because the swarm occurred at that time.
Exactly, it's precisely my point. So Trump doesn't have control of his own government.
That's correct. Now the question is, why didn't Tulsi Gabbard have that installed in his briefing? I mean, this is another potential intelligence failure where Trump could have ordered all kinds of sanctions and this and that, not having the other side of the story. He didn't have the full story.
He would have done that? I mean, because we've seen Trump do this on more than one occasion. If you remember when they had the 30-day ceasefire on energy targets. Okay, well, Trump didn't get, I'm very skeptical about what Trump knows and what Trump says about whether or not it's in any association with reality. So I don't know if Trump was briefed. I don't know if Trump was just lying. I don't know if the information is being filtered because
he had sufficient information to know that Russia had sending missiles, that had sent missiles into Kiev with the largest overnight onslaught to date.
Yeah.
Not knowing that it was in retaliation for the swarm that Kiev had sent the day before.
I guess what I'm getting at is, how do you know he didn't know?
He admitted it on the tarmac. He said, I had not heard that.
Was he talking to Xi Jinping?
He doesn't read his intelligence. And he only listens to what people tell him. He doesn't read the stuff. He doesn't sit there and study it. That's too much trouble. He goes by what people tell him, and he reacts to what the last person told him. That's what we're concerned about. Some of us are. And there's a pattern of behavior in this way that I'm now seeing.
Yeah.
And we're in a very precarious time. And he's got to be much more astute. And that's why I suggested even on the air the other day that Putin needs to call Trump directly on the hotline. They got a hotline, and to explain what's going on. Since Trump only listens to the reacts only to the last person he spoke to, well, call him. Don't bother to have it read in your presidential daily brief, in your PDB. Don't bother with that because you don't read it anyway. But once again, why didn't the DNI report that? And the answer is that about 80 to 90% of the DNI's office, which is Tulsi Gabbard's, comes from CIA.
Yeah.
They have an agenda, and that is being very anti-Russian, pro-Ukraine.
So you're saying this is the deep state. This is not
in living color, man. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, and in combination with the neocons and the mainstream media, they're all coalescing around him now, boxing him in once again. And frankly, I think he's being overwhelmed. Trump, I think, is being overwhelmed because now those forces are coalescing. Why does he keep on Kellogg, who's very pro-Ukrainian? I mean, it's just unbelievable. I can't figure it out, huh?
We are looking at this through very different lenses. People of policy. Donald Trump hired those people around him. If he's hiring Rubio, if he's hiring Kellogg, if he's hiring whatever that goofball.
Well, they're all neocons. They're all neocons.
Precisely.
Maybe there's no one else in town except for a few other of us. And he don't. Why doesn't he hire McGregor?
Why does he have a Maloof?
I would turn it down.
You turn the job. You turn the job down for real.
In a heartbeat.
You're supposed to do it for America. It's a calling, right?
Yeah,
I guess what I'm
not expecting any knock on the door. Let's put it that way. But you know, I don't know why he doesn't. McGregor would be a very good balance in all of this. Why? Maybe McGregor doesn't want the job either, because he knows what, as I do, what we would be getting into. It would be all these sharks swimming around you day in, day out, as we used to encounter when we were in the system.
There is one other potential, that Trump is not who you think he is. Meaning, Trump might have just lied on the tarmac. And
no, he said it so spontaneously, it sounded truthful.
It just came across truthful.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess from my point of view is Trump hired these people. He hired these people for a reason, people of policy.
Yeah.
And maybe in his mind, I need to balance out my administration. Maybe I have to put a show that I'm not so in the pro-Putin camp.
I don't dispute that. He has surrounded himself with these folks because he wants to hear their opinion, but he makes the ultimate decision. But if they're not giving him the critical information in the first place, that's serious.
Yeah.
And that's why I think there's got to be more direct contact between the strategic leaders of Putin and Trump directly. Bypass the intelligence community.
But see, I think Trump's problem is that he doesn't want to be seen as being too close to Putin, especially.
That was fair for the first administration when he was under the gun and being accused of collusion. But that issue has dissipated. Now we're dealing with something that's more real. He has to deal with Putin to try and resolve a war that he wants to resolve and get on with more of a geostrategic relationship, which Russia is necessary for a variety of reasons. But we got to get beyond this Ukrainian problem and the people within the agency that are hell bent on isolating, containing Russia, if not trying to overthrow the government.
I know, but
and that's what we're contending with.
I'm not certain that American president. I am not certain that an American president can give Russia what it needs in order to end that war. Meaning, the Kellogg plan is what Donald Trump effectively ended up on, not Witkoff's plan, Kellogg's plan. Okay, well, we have to come to some conclusion as to why he ended up with Kellogg's nonsense plan, as opposed to Witkoff saying, "Look, you have to give up the regions. That's the only way you're going to get."
I don't think he's embraced the Kellogg plan yet, because there's no way he can agree to give back all that territory. There's no way. The Russians won't do it. It's a non-starter.
Precisely my point. And yet, that's the plan.
And Witkoff has conceded that.
And yet, that is the plan that Donald Trump was presenting. This kind of modified Kellogg plan, where the U.S. was going to put troops in Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, where European forces were going to be in Ukraine. Like, none of these things were.
He hasn't bought into the notion of Europeans being in Ukraine. I haven't heard that. I've heard it proposed.
It's part of the Kellogg plan.
But he hasn't embraced the Kellogg plan because he knows that Putin will not allow or want NATO or troops from NATO countries in the western part of Ukraine.
So what do you think that Donald Trump gave when he gave his plan? Because he gave a 22-point plan which was effectively Kellogg's plan modified with European wants as what they were pushing as the peace proposal.
Well, that's why he called in Witkoff, because the Kellogg plan was a non-starter. He still has Witkoff going back and forth there.
He does, but Witkoff, okay, fair enough.
Witkoff, you don't see Kellogg meeting with Putin.
I don't see Kellogg meeting with Putin, but I do see.
And you won't.
Right. But whether he meets with Putin or not, what Donald Trump presented as his plan, I mean, you can read it. Hell, it's in Reuters, for God's sake, was a modified Kellogg plan. It wasn't Witkoff's. I mean, they said they would de jure accept the regions where Russia's already said that was a non-starter. What Russia is pushing for is denazification and acknowledgement that these are our regions, which sounds like more of an unconditional surrender. I think they will be open for a deal, but it can't be this notion of, having U.S. troops running Zaporozhye nuclear power plant.
It's not going to happen. Nor European troops, and Europeans can't even afford it anyway. But you're not going to. But Russia clearly is in the driver's seat right now. Witkoff acknowledges that. That's why you're seeing Witkoff continuously going into Moscow, and will continue to do so. And the fact that Trump has not imposed further sanctions, I should say, on Russia. Number one, they wouldn't work anyway. But number two, he was restrained because I think there's more going on behind the scenes, particularly through the Witkoff channel. And there's a dispute between Witkoff and Kellogg. There's a fight along with Rubio. I think some noses were blunted because all of a sudden, instead of the Secretary of State doing that job, you got Witkoff, a real estate guy, called into action to take the lead on this negotiation, and also on the Middle East. So that downgrades Rubio's influence.
Give me your take on Merz. Do you think those Taurus missiles are already in Ukraine?
Say that again.
Do you think those Taurus missiles are already in Ukraine?
Probably not, because they're going to require German technical assistance, and I don't think the German government wants to go so far as to have German personnel killed in Ukraine. The German people would revolt because they don't agree with this anyway. It's the elites, Merz, and for Taurus to go on in, they're all going to get shot down. But it's the principle of the thing. If they want to build a Taurus factory in Ukraine, that's going to be a target. Period.
Well, that's what they said they want to do. That they want to invest.
Yeah, I know, and it's but you see, this explains it all. The Europeans want to continue the war where Trump is trying to establish a peace. So why would he adapt or adopt anything the Europeans want at this stage? Because they want to prolong the war. So that's why this has become very murky. But Putin has remained steadfast in his terms, and he's winning.
See, the problem is the Europeans can always say, well, after the deal, we're going to put troops in, which immediately sets Russia off saying, okay, well, there can be no deal.
Well, that's why there may be a reason why there's probably going to be consideration on the Russian side just to take the rest of Ukraine, to maintain a buffer. Because, if you want to introduce those troops, in effect, you've made it a de facto NATO part of the West Ukraine, and that defeats the purpose. So he wants to set up a buffer, but what constitutes the buffer? The only thing that's going to constitute a buffer at this stage, given those terms of what the Europeans want to do, is take the whole country back.
Do you think there's a point where the Ukrainian military weakens to such a degree where they accept terms? Like, meaning, do you think there is any chance for an unconditional surrender? Or do you think, nope, these guys are lunatics, They're going to go down with the ship and take the ship down with them.
At this stage, it looks like they're going to go down with the ship, because I don't see, maybe some the troops who've been on the front lines would love to have a ceasefire, but you have elements that even defy the Ukrainian government that are within the Ukrainian military, such as the Azov group, that want to prolong this thing. They have their own agenda apart from the government. They want to confront Russia. They want to continue fighting it. So that's why Zelensky can't come to terms with with what he wants to do.
That reminds me. So Ukraine has given apparently their terms for ceasefire, which I don't know if anybody is even going to read. Russia is apparently going to give theirs on Friday. Is there any meeting of the minds in these terms at all, or is this all theater in the way that I think it is?
I don't know. We'll have to see what they come up with in those memoranda of understanding.
Yeah.
Each side is supposed to present, as you say, I think it's on 2 June that they'll present their proposals for a ceasefire. We'll see how they match and mismatch, and in terms of what they want. And I think Russia's been pretty clear what it wants.
They have.
But what will Ukraine go along with any of that? I don't know. I tend to doubt it. Yeah. I think they'll have to concede Crimea. They will. They still have notions of wanting to take back Donbass and Luhansk. That's not going to happen. And in fact, I would imagine that, given this initial exchange of MOUs on terms for a ceasefire, that it will be unacceptable by the Ukrainians, and the Russians will just continue to plow along and take back more territory, probably on a more accelerated basis now, because now they want to, in light of the decision by Merz that they're going to be giving long-range missiles, that means Russia is going to have to create a greater buffer.
Yeah, it's funny. I put that on Twitter too. I was like, 300 kilometers, that means we need a 300-kilometer buffer. I'm curious on what do you think Trump is going to do, though? Do you think Trump is going to say, okay, I think both of you are horrible people. You guys are nuts. I'm calling it a day and I'm walking.
I think that's ultimately what he's going to come to. And he'll make out his own arrangement with the Russians. And if the Europeans want to prolong the war, it'll be done without U.S. help.
I think
it'll be the beginning of the end of NATO.
So you really think that the war is not a hindrance to Trump making a side deal with the Russians?
Right. Yeah.
Is there enough? I mean, that's not going to be political pressure on Donald. If Trump is under political pressure now, and he's still giving money and still selling weapons to Ukraine, wouldn't the pressure be enormous for him not to make a side deal with the Russians with the war still continuing?
Well, I think he has a more geostrategic imperative of what is in the U.S. national interest. Having a strategic relationship with Russia is more in the national strategic interest. There is no national security threat to the U.S. on Ukraine. None.
Agreed.
The same with Iran. None. But but to the Europeans, it's a different story. And if the Europeans want to go at it, and he's made that clear, I mean, that's the direction he seems to be heading. He's going to do what he wants to do with Russia. But if they want to continue doing their thing, it's going to be done without U.S. assistance. But I don't see how they'll be able to go on. They want to continue the war at least until 2030, when they think they're going to have their a renewed industrial base to be able to pump out these weapons systems for Ukraine. I mean, it's suicidal. And we now have, over 2 centuries, we've seen a pattern of behavior by the Europeans where they're continuously fighting these ancient feuds, going back and forth, back and forth. And I don't know that the U.S. wants to be involved in their ancient disputes.
But see, that's the rub with NATO, right?
Yeah.
Like, let me ask you this: if Russia,
NATO was created for one thing, that reason dissolved. Now we're not going. Why do we want to fight a third world war that's going to be instigated for the 3rd time by Germany? Why?
I agree. No, I agree.
Why?
I mean, this was comment Lavrov made, right? Germany is taking itself to ruins.
Well, this is exactly what's going on right now. And why do we want to be involved in that? I mean, again, there's a pattern of behavior here throughout all of history, European history, that they just are constantly fighting with one another. Why do we want to get involved in that? And,
Okay.
and that's why he's pushing his economic agenda, thinking that maybe economics, trade, which is much more refined and streamlined today than it was in the 19th century, is more attractive than wanting to engage in war. But they're reverting back. The Europeans are reverting back to 19th century mentality. They can't help themselves.
You're so right. Yeah,
I mean,
you're so right. I don't get it. I was talking to my ex yesterday, and I said,
it's suicidal. It's suicidal.
I said, you guys keep starting world wars. And I was like, you guys keep starting world wars. And I don't know if it's because their history goes back so much longer. Like the US is what, 200, 300, 400 years old? Like we're somewhat of a young country.
250, almost 250.
Yeah, as opposed to Europe, where they have like thousands of years of history. And these old feuds, bad blood, it's like a marriage that you can't get out of.
At least a millennial, yeah.
Yeah.
At least 1,000 years worth. And it goes on and on and on. Look, as an example, very short example, West Ukraine. It used to be part of the Lithuanian Polish Republic.
Mm-hmm.
They want that back because they still have speakers, Polish and Lithuanian speakers in those regions in West Ukraine. And the eastern part of Ukraine was all Russian speaking. That's being, and Russia has now annexed that. Same with Crimea. So, we're reverting back to old historical ties, perhaps back to prior to the Habsburgs period. Come on.
Oh, you're talking
we
about
gotta reread history.
Russia. Yeah.
I mean, we got to reread history to understand where we're heading back to or where we are now. And in order to understand the present and the future, we need to know the past.
Do you think Trump ultimately just wants to walk? If he could snap his fingers.
Oh, I think so. He's being surrounded by these alligators constantly, nipping at him. And I think a coalition of opposition to his policy has formed. This very anti-Russian coalition of neocons and the intelligence community and the mainstream media. They're all coalescing against him. Part of the reason, of course, is that he's Trump.
This is true for Joe Biden. This is true for Joe Biden also. I've seen.
Well, Biden didn't do anything. He just let him run rapid. That's why we got involved in the wars, in the 2 wars in the first place in 4 years. How's that happen?
No, I do agree with you. I guess what I'm saying is, I saw it with my own eyes at the Biden-Putin summit, where Joe Biden in that moment is being a rare moment of conciliatory, and he's sounding very similar to Putin in regards to both of them giving their speeches. And I remember sitting there thinking, I was talking to my boss, I was like, hey, these guys sound very similar. This may, be something good. And he's like, no, it's not. Like he's totally cynical. No, it's not. This is going to be nothing. And it ended up being less than nothing considering the war that eventually took place. But I watched media go after Joe Biden when Joe Biden was trying to be more conciliatory at the podium. And it was like, hey, did you punch Putin in the nose? Hey, did you scream at him? Did you tell him about himself? And it's like, what is a president to do with that, right? Like you
got to keep in mind how much the mainstream media is an instrument of the deep state and particularly the intelligence community.
Yeah.
They're a major instrument. That's why I go back to the example of just a few days ago on the tarmac, that the fact that Trump was not informed about something very critical in that equation of why there was that exchange, that he should have been informed, and he wasn't, and he was making decisions based upon what he knew at the time, and that's dangerous.
Does Trump really believe that Russia thinks he's a mediator as opposed to a party to the conflict?
No, I think it's gotten to the point they don't trust Trump anymore because he flip-flops so much. Calling, the other day, I think it was the crowning glory when he was thinking that maybe Putin was crazy for launching those missiles. He basically accused Putin of being crazy, and so it got increasingly personal.
Yeah,
and I think that now Moscow does not trust Trump any longer because they don't think he has. You know why? Because they don't think he has control of his own house.
Yeah, and he doesn't.
No,
when
he
Moscow
doesn't.
speaks, they speak in one voice. Even Medvedev is, he may be more boisterous, but he's not saying anything different than Putin or Lavrov or any of these other people say.
Well, he's always been the bad cop while Putin's been the good cop, but now the two are coming together.
One last point before I let you go, and I'm glad you mentioned that. So I've been seeing in Russian media statements like this. Senior criminal aide Yuri Yushikov has said that the POTUS is poorly being advised on Ukraine. Trump makes many statements. Moscow monitors them. Trump still fails to understand that Russia only strikes military infrastructure targets. It appears that Trump is not being informed about Ukraine's terrorist attacks against Russian cities. And it's not just him saying that. There are multiple people who have been saying that coming from the Russian side. Give me your take on this. They're trying to help him save face. And what I mean by save face is...
Well, they want Trump to succeed because he's the only one who has at least admitted that why this war started. It wasn't just an overnight fling on the part of Putin, that there was a buildup over time with NATO expansion, and Trump has acknowledged that. For the Russians, that's quite an achievement. And it's historically accurate. But this is what I was alluding to, not alluding, I was saying that with that tarmac revelation, that's what the special advisor to Putin was referring to, that he didn't have complete information on which to make statements and judgments. And that's a very serious thing. And once again, I think it comes right out of the DNI. Why isn't the DNI reporting that? Because 80 to 90% of the DNI is CIA infiltrated by staff. They're all seconded over to Tulsi Gabbard's staff. And there's no way you're going to clean them out.
Wow.
They need to eliminate that office altogether.
Well, a lot of people, myself included, by the way, thought Tulsi would be a great addition to the team.
No, she's fine. It's the people who surrounds her too. They're all surrounded. They're boxing. They're trying to contain the people who are opposed to the way of thinking of the deep state. So they've contained them, but then they slow roll them when it comes to any decision making or any policy direction that they want to follow. They're always going to throw obstacles in the way. I recall years ago when James Woolsey was CIA director under Clinton. Mm-hmm. I had a conversation with him, and he said to me, he says, "I'm very frustrated in this job." He says, "The DDO, the director of operations, are constantly throwing obstacles in the way of any decisions I want made, and I can't get anything done." And he says, and Clinton has only allowed me to come in to brief him 3 times. And he says that helicopter that helicopter that crashed into the White House years ago. The joke was that was Woolsey trying to get a 4th appointment into the White House.
John mentioned that. I didn't know that Al Gore was getting those meetings, but Bill Clinton only took 3.
Yeah.
Oh, that is amazing to me. I had the notion that the president, quote unquote, leader of the free world, who has his nose into everything, gets 3 briefings is astonishing.
Well, he had his nose somewhere, but it wasn't in intelligence.
That is true. That is true. Michael Maloof, man, thank you for this. I always appreciate these conversations.
Thank you.
Michael Maloof, he is former senior security policy analyst in the Office of Secretary of Defense, author, regular contributing analyst on RT and other media outlets. He has nearly 30 years of federal service experience in the U.S. Department of Defense, but would not pick up the phone if Donald Trump calls him to serve his country.
I don't answer phone calls I don't recognize.
Fair enough. You have a good one. You be safe, all right?
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
All right. That is great. It is disturbing to me for the president to be this nosy in the other country's affairs. But when you really get down to the nub of it, in one sense, he doesn't read anything. He's incurious, and he only knows what people tell him, and probably knows it poorly at that. That is super disturbing. That is very, very disturbing. But shout out to all my guests. I want to give a shout out to John Kiriakou. Always love John. In fact, I always love my guests. Here's the thing with me. There's some guests I have conversations with. There's some guests I am just kind of glued to because I'm listening to what they're telling me and I don't know enough to give commentary. But I found all of them interesting. I don't think I would invite them on if I didn't. And, I find all of them interesting. All of them are telling me something that is informing my point of view in a way. Yes, the show is also for the audience, but the show is also for me. I mean, names on the show, right? And so when I'm having these conversations, whether I agree or disagree with the guests, it's less relevant than me getting something out of the conversation. Look, I am not of mind. I don't know if Donald Trump knew one way or the other, meaning if he was briefed or not. I am strongly of the belief that Russia is trying to help him save face, at least from the standpoint of the Russian population, and from the standpoint of trying to make an excuse for him of like, look, I know this guy's a dunce. I know he doesn't read. He's not like Putin. He's not informed. He's not being briefed. And so, if he was briefed, though, he would think differently, which, again, I still don't know. So I get it. They're trying to help him save face and save face in the context of we want public will to still be able to work with Donald Trump. I get it. It is disturbing to me what John is saying, that Bush 8 years later might have found out that he had signed a document for torture. I do know in his book, I said, hell yeah, waterboard him. But again, I will remember historians talking about Bush might have added that after the fact because he didn't want to look like an asshole for not knowing that he effectively agreed upon torture. And let's be honest, he still might have agreed upon it anyway, right? So it doesn't really matter. It's just disturbing. Let's go to the chat. RJ Raymond. So if John is so readily agreeing with you on Russia moving troops into Ukraine, why would he constantly open his RT show with a condemnation of it? Because I think it's virtue signaling. And I don't mean that poorly, RJ. I don't mean it poorly. That's not an attack on John or anything else. I'm saying that because I've had several guests make that exact same condemnation because there's something about them that gripe at this notion of military action. Like it's something inherent about it of, oh my God, you're killing people, we don't like it. And because it's something inherently, oh my God, you're killing people that don't like it, then they feel the need to do it. The school teacher thing is a really good example. Okay, Bobby and Johnny are fighting. I don't like the fight that Bobby and Johnny are fighting, so I'm going to punish both. And my point of view is, well, fuck that. If Bobby didn't do it, then Bobby should be punished. Johnny should be punished. Fuck Bobby. That's the way I look at it, right? Blame the person that did it, not both, because you're too lazy to figure out who actually did it. And if I'm looking at a situation where I'm like, okay, well, what did you expect them to do? And by the way, again, I've had NATO people on. I've asked them the same thing. I've had Daniel Lazar on. I've asked him the same thing because Daniel said the exact same thing that John did. He says, I completely condemn what Russia did. And you would go through the same line of logic of, okay, well, what do you want them to do? Give me your alternative. Maybe you're smarter than I am. Maybe you can come up with something better than I can. I don't know what else to do. You've done all of your negotiations. You've tried to negotiate. They've lied to you about negotiations. You were standing out there like a preacher, begging people to come to Jesus, and they said, you don't get the respect to even have a security zone. Okay, then what the fuck do you expect me to do? You get Obama saying you're Nigeria with snow. You overthrow a government and put in a band of Nazis on our border after we lost 30 million people fighting the Nazis, what do you expect us to do? It's that part, right? What would the US do? And if you're an honest actor, you're stuck with the reality of, okay, fair enough, you're right. It's hard to get around that line of argument unless you can tell me something that you can come up with. I have not been able to come up with anything, nor even people who are hardcore agreeing with the NATO position on this stuff can come up with a different solution, especially if you're an American and you were here for the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? So I think it's a knee-jerk reaction. What did I tell you, right? The one commonality of all of the people that are at RT Sputnik are anti-war. They tend to be against wars. They tend to not like them. They tend to be, even if they're on the right or they're on the left, if they're somewhere in between, they tend to be very dodgy about wars. That's not a value set that is relative to Russia. Meaning it's not, we're relative to wars that America takes, but we're okay with wars that Russia takes. It's not that. They're typically anti-war. And so the moment that you see Russia go rummaging it through a country, your first thought is, whoa, what the fuck is this? This is outrageous. What are you doing? But that needs to be tempered on some level with, yes, I think that sucks that you had to do that, but let's be very clear, you were provoked in doing it. That's why I didn't give a condemnation. I have never given a condemnation for it. Because from my point of view, bullies need to be punched in the goddamn nose. And if you are provoking and poking a bear, you're murdering 14,000 ethnic Russians, and you're not even pretending like they're Ukrainians. You've overthrown a government. You've ignored multiple agreements, hell, blew them off, and openly, so brazenly flaunted the fact that you blew it off and, was never even serious about those agreements. When you've went after and demonized the person of a particular country saying you don't get security guarantees, your government under the Soviet Union collapsed, so, we don't have to acknowledge or respect you anymore. Okay. Fair enough. You don't have to respect me anymore. I will take my respect at the barrel of a gun. That's what I would do. And I would shoot every Ukrainian in the face until I get the respect I deserve. And we get our terms of surrender. We have nothing else to say. Fuck it. It's that. You can wring your hands all you want after the fact, but you had years of escalation, years of provocation. And again, it's not that I'm any less anti-war than John or any of these people. I despise war. By the same token, I'm pragmatic. And pragmatism will lead you to a place that you need to be strong enough to defend yourself. Look, the smartest guy in the world can get punched in the nose and have his stuff stolen. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter how clever you are. None of this stuff matters. You need to have basic capability of being able to defend yourself and impart enough harm into somebody else for them to leave you your devices to be that smart person, or be that bright person, or be that clever person, or be whatever the country you want. This is the same conversation I had yesterday with KJ, where KJ is like, we're sending signals. As I pointed out to KJ, nobody cares about your signals. Nobody cares. They don't care. They will keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing with the idea that each time you let them push and establish that new position, then from their point of view, now operations begin from this new rung. If you let us get to 8, fair enough. We will solidify at 8, and now operations begin in order to get to 7. If you let us get to 7, then operations begin until we get to 6. And at some point, Taiwan will be ours. Or at some point, you're going to have to lose a hell of a lot of Chinese in order to finally take Taiwan, which is what effectively is happening right now in Ukraine. So, yeah, I may come across as brutal with this stuff. It's not that I'm any anti-less war. I'm just pragmatic. Fact of the matter is, I've seen this country knock over government after government after government. I've watched it. Why do you think my reaction to Ritter was so strong when he was making this John Bolton argument about Iran? It's that I've seen us do this. I've seen us respond in these ways. I've seen us murder Yemenis. I've seen us murder all of these Palestinians, basically using Israel as the tip of the spear to do so. I've seen us do this stuff. So a country that is that sociopathic, that full of psychopaths, that don't care about human life, what are you supposed to do with that? And do you honestly think a strongly worded letter is going to be the thing that changes the mind? Or do you think shooting people in the face is going to be the thing that makes the difference? I think the thing that shooting people in the face makes the difference. That sounds horrible. I hate to say it, but it is true. As we are seeing right now in Ukraine, where respect is being taken at the barrel of a gun because it was not being given in any other way. That is harsh. I get that's harsh. My point is that John agrees because it's difficult to get around that argument. It doesn't mean that he likes what's happening any more than I do. It's the reason why I call what's happening in Ukraine a catastrophe. It's the reason why, even on the radio show, I used to call it a catastrophe because it's a catastrophe. Those people, when they voted in Zelensky, they voted in a peace candidate. That peace candidate went fucking insane. And as opposed to making amends with the Russians and not going after the Russian language and everything, he's effectively become a dictator, captive by the hard right banderites, who effectively is ensconced in military and in that government. That's the reality to which we're confronted with. Now, you may not like war. It sucks. I get it. But you may not like to fight either. But I guarantee you that if you keep continuously being threatened over and over and over, and this point is going to happen where your capability of resisting will be eliminated, then you respond. You don't have a choice. And for teachers and all of these other people who are like, oh no, you should never fight, shut up. Just shut up. That's why it's icky to think that that's the level to which you have to stoop. It's that. And he feels some kind of way in acknowledging that. And I would imagine there's a certain amount of virtue signal that goes along with feeling like you need to condemn war. I understand where he's coming from. I understand where anybody's coming from on that front. I just disagree with him. I don't think you can avoid all fights. Just that. The well-dressed nerd Braves review. Isn't it a part of super hot fire Tulsi's job to inform Trump on matters like the strike on Putin? Yes, 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 yes. Well-dressed nerd, yes, yes. Brave, yes. Definitively, decisively, indubitably, 1000%, yes. Hence the question, where the fuck is Tulsi? Where is she? She seemed to have faded into the background. Now, it's very possible that she is working behind the scenes. Who knows? But one of the things that people were talking about, right, is that Tulsi would have her briefings where stuff like this would be included in the briefing. Hence my point that I don't know if Donald Trump is telling the truth. He could be lying. It was most likely Western intelligence that was used to even find Putin's helicopter in the first place. So I don't know if he's telling the truth. Trump lies as easily as he breathes. That's kind of the problem with somebody who lies as often as Trump. He could be telling the truth. He could be lying. Either way, he hired these people. And in the context of hiring these people, people of policy, people of personnel, these are the people that he chose to surround himself with. Fair enough. After talking to people who've been behind the curtain and in the blob, I guess it is possible that the president could be maneuvered in such a way, especially a president like Trump, who doesn't know much, and as Maloof points out, doesn't read, which just fuck's sake. The notion that we're having a conversation and people are like, the president doesn't read is mind-blowing to me, but okay, fair enough, that's where we are. Yeah, Brave, I don't know. Maybe she wrote it in a policy document and the president doesn't read. Maybe Rubio, Kellogg, or one of these other people knew about it. The president didn't act, so they just didn't tell because they don't want him to know about it. Who knows? I don't know. I don't know. But to answer your question, yes, that is precisely the reason that people like me, I strongly suspect people like you, love the fact that Tulsi Gabbard was chosen for DNI, because our thought was Donald Trump will be given the information necessary for him to make the choices necessary to move forward, and it won't just be the blob and swamp monsters like Kellogg and Rubio giving him information, or that other spook that was working with Israel, or that was a spy for Israel. I can't think of his name. It'll come to me in a moment. Not so much. Not so much. Maybe she needs to put that stuff on Post-its, write it in crayon. I have no idea. If she is informing, it's not getting through. But you also heard what John pointed out. I think Maloof even pointed it out. Bill Clinton, over the course of 8 years, only went to 3 briefings. 3 CIA briefings over 8 years. And that information was being filtered through Al Gore. Okay, so what does it look like for Donald Trump? What does it look like for Trump? Yeah. All right. I am going to bring this to a close. Let's see. I see someone said, Tulsi only cares about Tulsi. Oh, say Lou. I don't know that. I don't know that. She literally backtracked on Syria to get the job. Jay, that is true. That is true. That is indeed true. Fair enough. Fair enough on that. Fair enough. Whoever tells gets the blame. Lil Tanner. But that's not always true, though. I mean, I don't know if you're talking about the 2 people fighting or not, so I'm not going to comment. Refuses to read is wolf of ignorance. Joseph Houghton, it's just ignorance. I mean, for fuck's sake, you're president of the United States. Who the fuck? Like, how do you say what you will about Obama? He was a Harvard scholar. And the issue with people like that is ideology, meaning I don't care about the harm that's being caused. I get the harm that's being caused. I'm still going in that direction because that's the direction I'm going. And for better or for worse, that's the way presidents act in general. So whether Trump reads or not is secondary to the point. If he's moving in a direction, he's moving in a direction. He's an American president. So he's going in the direction he's moving. Consequences be damned. I don't know what is in his mind. And because I don't know what's in his mind, I don't know what he ultimately wants to accomplish. Maybe he wants a ceasefire, or maybe he wants to end the war. But when he's talking about the end the war, it's so absurd that it makes me think he doesn't really want to end the war. But who knows? Maybe he doesn't know any better. Maybe he's being told by Kellogg, hey, this is a good idea. They'll go for this. You just have to keep pushing for it. Well, how do I know, right? I don't know what is in his mind. I do know, in a very specific instance, he claimed he didn't know about the 1,000 attacks of drones aimed at Moscow. He claimed he didn't know about the drones that nearly hit Putin's helicopter. He claims he didn't know these things. Maybe, maybe not. Let's say for the moment that he was comically naive and completely incurious about it. And because you have many neocons that are around him that don't want to end the war, they just only told him one side of it. But even that's not really shocking. Why wouldn't they tell him one side? That's all they've been telling the entire war. And truth of the matter is the U.S. is an enemy combatant, meaning we are giving them money, weapons, materials, everything else to fight that war, with the exception of manpower. Trump can't act like he's not a belligerent in the conflict. He may pretend that. Nobody else believes that. So he can't be shocked that his administration, the people around his administration, are effectively feeding him information specific to the side to which the United States is on, because the U.S., have no doubts, is on a particular side. All right, guys, I'm going to end this. I am dragging a bit of ass tonight. I'm going to say, like, Russia can demand reparations. Oh, no, the Charles G. No, they can't. They could. Who's going to pay it? Who's going to pay it? We don't even know if Ukraine is going to exist as an entity at the end of this conflict. So who's going to pay it? And I'll go further. Not only do we not know if Ukraine is going to exist as an entity in this conflict, let's say Ukraine doesn't exist as an entity at the end of this conflict. Who's going to rebuild Ukraine? How much money is it going to cost to rebuild Ukraine after Russia effectively has to destroy mostly all of it? Because Russia will get stuck with the responsibility of rebuilding all of it. Yeah. It is far easier to get into wars than get out of wars. That's always true. And God, man, 3 years ago, I kept asking this question, and it was too premature at the time, but damn, it was on point. How do you end this, Mark? How do you get out? How do you get out? How do you extricate yourself from this? And it sounds like the way to extricate yourself from this is just go killing your way through as many Ukrainians, soldiers, as necessary until the government collapses or you take all of it. That seems to be where we are. Matthew, would there be a wider war in Ukraine with NATO? I hope not. I mean, if you heard Maloof made the point of saying this is getting more dicey because it's kind of what John said. And John didn't disagree on this, by the way. If Putin has come out and said that if Germany fires a missile, because that's the difference, and I think that's the difference in what John is saying. Ukraine has been firing drones and missiles into Moscow and into Russian cities, but they have been doing it. I hope you get my point. They have been doing it. Even if it used intelligence, they have been doing it themselves. And if there was US, UK, France hands on it, Moscow have hit the ball. They haven't acknowledged it. It is different, however, when Putin himself comes out and says, if you do this, and you will be doing this, because it is impossible for you to do it without your hands being on it, then Germany is attacking Russia, and that is not tolerated. We will target your factories, and if necessary, we will target your cities. Don't fuck with us. Margarita Simonian comes out, says the exact same thing. The guy from the Duma comes out, says the exact same thing, meaning, again, there's a consistency of what all of them are saying, led by the president, Putin in this case. It's one thing if you have a bomb thrower saying it. It's another thing when you have Putin saying it. And of course, the problem with Putin saying it, that red line, if you back down on that red line, they're going to say, see, it's not serious, which incentivizes more missiles that go flying into Moscow or Russia. So I don't know an answer to that right now. I think Russia's point of view is they may. They would have to prepare for it. How could they not? Let's just hope they're wrong. All right, I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, I'm going to say subscribe. I want to thank all of you. You can support this work through PayPal, Patreon, Super Chats, buy me a coffee, all of those things. Make sure you like the video. And I will see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Richard Wolf is going to be here. Oh, by the way, Danny Hafung, he is going to be here next week, apparently. I canceled the appointment with him because he would make a choice. But he said he may be available. He will be available next week. And who else? Oh, Leif Maloof. He's going to be here in the morning. I'm trying to think who else. We'll see. You guys have a fantastic day. And I will see you guys tomorrow morning, bright and early. Jamal Thomas Morning Show. What is this? Jamal Thomas, you're going to be on with Sarah and RBN tonight. Oh, I don't know, man. I told her to send a link. I'm not sure, though. Keep in mind, for me, it is 10:02 p.m., not a.m. I've been up all day. I have jet lagged like a mofo. I went to bed at 6 a.m. this morning because from my point of view in Albania, 6 a.m. is 12 p.m. 12 p.m. is the normal time to go to bed. So I don't know. If I'm still up, yes. If I'm not, fair enough. We'll play by ear. So we'll see. All right. Yes, Jamal, go there. Dude, it's 3 a.m. They start that at 3 a.m. for me. 3 a.m. We'll see if I'm still up. Sometimes it takes me a while to cut videos and do all that stuff. Manny, Ross, Bruce, go sleep. Thank you, Manny. I appreciate that somebody here cares about my sleep health. All right, what happened to your pictures in the background? Oh, new place. Sheree, I'm in a new spot. So on the 23rd, that was the reason why I was gone Thursday and Friday, because I had to move to a new location. And so I'm in a new location. I'm going to be here for 3 months. But I can find pictures to put in the background for you. I can find pictures. I can find something. I can go to the store and see if I can find something to put in the background. Y'all hate the white walls. The white walls are too white. I'll try to find something to put in the background. All right. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. You guys have a fantastic day. And I will see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Get a mirror, man. Oh, that would be weird. That would be weird. It would just be this infinite reflection in the background. Have a good one, guys. Be safe. Jamal Thomas Morning Show, episode 164. Signing off. I'll see you some of my paintings. Cherie, I would take some of your paintings, by the way. I would absolutely take some of your paintings. Email me. We'll work that out. Have a good one, all. Be safe.